Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Next Gen Racing iRacing GT3 GTE Season 2 series. This is the final of the pre-season testing sessions, as I understand it, and today we are at the Italian circuit of Imola, also known as the Autodrome. Well, one second, as we had some slight technical hiccups early on, the Autodromo Enzo E Dino Ferrari, but we'll refer to it as Imola for what is the final pre-season test event, and we are expecting some fantastic racing tonight from all of our drivers as they all seek to essentially get themselves underway for the finale of what is the car selection period, after which they will need to finalise their car choices and then get ready for getting underway with Season 2, which commences on the 30th of June as of this month. So at the circuit, the Italian circuit, consisting of 19 corners in total, a circuit raced throughout the eras with regards to Formula 1, but also GT3, GT and a number of other racing classes, and indeed we should expect some very tight and twisty turns and some extended straights leading to some fast and furious action. I'm going to be your commentator for this evening. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141, depending on what media you follow me on. But you can see there from our schedule, we get underway with qualifying at 2000 or 8 o'clock in the evening British Summer Time, that's BST or UTC +1. That qualifying session will last 15 minutes, after which we'll get underway with the opening sprint race, a 15-minute race where all of our drivers will be pedal to the metal, no one having to make any pit stops. And then after that we'll be taking a short break, and then at 5 to 9 we'll be getting underway with the feature race, which is the 60-minute endurance race effectively, where our drivers will have a mandatory pit stop and it'll be a test of strategy, not just outright pace. But before we get down to the trackside, a quick word from our sponsor for this series, and that is Apex Racing Academy. Back to the trackside, we're going to move away from introducing the circuit and let's get looking at our drivers as they're getting themselves set up around the track right now. Now, of course, at this point, it is worth noting that we're in the final practice session. We have got 10 minutes to go before we get underway with the qualifying session. And so everybody right now just getting themselves up to speed and getting in those final little bits of preparation which they need before they can at last get underway with some fast and furious action. This is also an opportunity for those who haven't had the chance to really practice the Imola circuit, although a good number of our drivers are expected to have got in a good amount of practice beforehand. It's a good time for them to get their foot in and get themselves settled in. Now, some drivers, of course, you will recall from last time. For example, we have Matt Evans making his way here around the circuit right now, heading up towards what is, if we remember correctly here, the second of the chicanes, in fact going through the right hand now, and that is leading up towards the hairpin corner, which is known as Tosa, the turn 7 corner, where many of you will infamously remember earlier this year Lewis Hamilton having his off in the Formula 1 in the wet weather race. For Emmons returning once again, and this time running out in the BMW M4 GT3 machine. We saw it was a very strong machine at the previous test event in Catalonia, and we look forward to seeing what Emmons is able to achieve here today at the Italian circuit. It's not just the Emmons show, we've also got Jeremy Debova, as we see him here, making his way around the circuit, running out in the Porsche machinery here, running out in the Porsche GT3, that Porsche 911, and having a very successful string as he makes his way across the start-finish line to go on to another lap, with just shy of 10 minutes remaining of the practice session right now. Coming charging it down towards the first sets of corners then, we look forward to seeing what the Dutchman is able to achieve tonight. We then got the return as well of Colin Martin, making his way here in towards the opening chicanes in the BMW M4 GT3 as well. A very popular car, it would seem, with a good number of our participants. And do keep in mind, the drivers you are seeing here are not necessarily all the participants will be taking part in the main season. Remember, this is a test event session, and we are expecting to have plenty more participants, not all of them wanting to take part tonight in the testing. So as a result of that, we are going to expect many unfamiliar names to arrive later on in the month, i.e. towards the end of the month when we get underway with round number 1 on the 30th of June. But Martin will be a familiar face to everybody here, as we also have the familiar face of Aaron D. Taylor making his way right now up towards the opening chicane here, and you can see they're setting that 1:44 on his previous practice lap, that 44.53. A nice lap there, only to get it horrifically wrong coming out the opening chicane and putting the car immediately into the wall. He won't want to be doing that, of course, when we get underway with the main qualifying and racing. We've also got Mark Sykes here. Mark returning once again, the British driver, making his way down towards the opening corners as well in the Porsche 911 right now, building up a good amount of speed. And Mark, last time out taking part in the Catalonia event, was one of the slower drivers within the field, but just looking to get his hand in and getting that experience in all the different cars available to him, in the hope of finding the car that would suit him best for the upcoming season. And Mark, of course, part of the main administration team for NXTGEN Racing. We're very grateful to see Mark out on circuit, as we are indeed Matt Emmons, another member of the administration team and the organising team for NXTGEN Racing, particularly with respect to the iRacing series. So it's great to have them both running around on circuit and getting in the track time and a good bit of racing. We've also got Mark Baker making his way here down towards the chicane, and we can see running in the Porsche 911. A lot of Porsches here and a lot of BMWs. It's almost as if we've got a German grid here in terms of German manufacturers, as he makes his way out of the second chicane up towards Tosa right now. And as he comes into the braking zone for the hairpin here, getting it nice and settled, and now flying out of the corner. And we wish Mr. Baker all the best today as he heads around the circuit. We also got from the Netherlands, Kurt van Hohenacker. I believe that's how we pronounce his surname, but if not, I'm sure he can tell us in the chat. Alternatively, post-race, we've been able to butcher his surname sufficiently. I do make a habit of butchering them, I must admit. But the Dutchman here having a good run up through Aquaminarli and the chicane that follows, and now going through the final few corners in order to complete his opening lap, including the chicane there, and then he's going to be coming downhill into the double left-hander sequence before completing another lap. Running in the Porsche 911, and I believe that is the GTE car there, and it is the case that the Dutchman picking one of the more comfortable machines, indeed one of the preferred machines amongst all of our drivers, and we'll see what he's able to achieve. And we've also got here Navarro Debova, so we've got the Debova brothers. I believe they are brothers, making their way around on the circuit, albeit the second of the two brothers here deciding to go for a rather distinctive pink and black liveried Porsche right comparison with his brother, and as a result of that, I think we can tell the two Navarro here, making it very clear which car he's in, and we wish him all the best tonight. And the last of our drivers currently making their way around the circuit, Matthew Addy in the Porsche 911 as well. Indeed, we do have a pack of 911s around here, so I think it is going to be the story of 911s versus BMW M4s. But still, not to complain, I'm sure we'll expect plenty of fantastic racing. And it will be the question of which is going to be the stronger. Will it be, particularly in the GT3 category, will it be having a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, alternative front-engine rear-wheel drive car, the Porsche of course having the engine located behind the driver, whereas with the BMW the engine located in front of the driver where it would normally be on most of your typical road cars, whereas the Porsche of course having the engine placed where it's the ideal position as it's known, well the fact it's more towards the centre of the car and provides better rear rotation naturally through the corners because you're bringing that mass around a lot faster. Now if you are tuning in tonight, you may be tuning in on one of 3 platforms, i.e. Facebook, YouTube or Twitch. It's been hosted on my personal Twitch, that's the TX141 channel on Twitch, but also on the official Next Gen Racing Facebook page and the Next Gen Racing YouTube page. If you have typed something in chat already, unfortunately I don't seem to have seen it come through. I am testing a new app at the moment to be able to see all the different chats together in one location at one time, so fingers crossed we are able to see it, but I can tell that there are 9 of you tuning in approximately right now, and it's good to see people tuning in. And if you are there and you've got access to chat, do not be shy, feel free to say hi. Don't leave me lonely here in the commentary box, as we're just really counting down now with 5 minutes to go until we get underway with the opening qualifying session. Now at this point you may be wondering, okay, well tell me a little bit more about Imola, let's think a bit more about the circuit. Well, how about we jump on board with one of our drivers who's making their way around. We're going to be jumping on board with Debova here, and we'll take you around an entire lap as he's making his way. So coming up towards what is the first set of corners, then coming up to Variante Tamburello. So this is the triple header effectively of turns 2 and 3, which he's made his way through right now, and then you've got turn 4 coming up, as you see his brother there getting it very wrong, flying out to turn 4 very nicely, and now he's got the run up towards Variante Villeneuve or Villeneuve chicane as he makes his way into turns 5 and 6, and you've got to carry a lot of speed here, let the rear end flow into 5 and then get the car gently back on the throttle through 6, having no issues there at all, Debova, as he now goes up into Tosos. That's turn number 7 here, the hairpin corner of course, and one of the lowest speed corners on the circuit. Nicely done, and now charging up the hill here towards turn 8, which is the little right hand kink which he's about to pass through, and then to turn 9 Piratella, the left hander here, which is very blind in terms of where the exit curve is. You only see it once you've hit the apex curve and effectively you're committed to the corner. And now coming downhill through 10 up into 11, 12 and 13 Aquamurale, going through 11 and 12 right now, and then it's the uphill left hander where he's got to slide the car out, very nicely done by there Debova. And now coming down the hill here, well up the hill initially towards Variante Alta, the final of the chicane, so turns 14 and 15, a far braking zone there, it looks a long way away as he makes his way through, jumping over the apex curves there, using the car to his full advantage. And now the long run down the hill here towards turns 17 and 18, known as Ravazza. You've got the little right hand kink here of turn 16, but coming into Ravazza right now, braking at approximately 80 metres, coming down through the gears here, and now you've just got to be hesitant on that power coming out of turn 18 because you want to get the car pointed, and as soon as that car's ready to go, he absolutely floors it, comes through 19 here, which is the right hand kink, and that is your 19 corners to complete the lap of Imola. A nice lap there by Debova, and we do expect to see plenty more from the driver as we go into the qualifying session, with him setting a 44.266 there, a very strong lap, and indeed it does look as though a good number of our drivers are looking very competitive. Colin Martin in particular not too far behind right now, and in fact following Debova around the circuit, and I believe the majority of our drivers right now, if not all of our drivers, are running it in GT3 machines at this point in time, and we can definitely tell with Martin running that BMW M4 there as he makes his way through the opening chicanes, and now heading up towards Toes here. Running a little bit wide though out of the Villeneuve chicane, and that's going to cost him some time because he's run out onto the runoff area and then subsequently probably dipped a toe, i.e. one of the wheels in the gravel very briefly, playing a little bit of sandcastles that front left wheel, and that's just going to bog him down and just cost him a small amount of momentum as he's now making his way out of Tosa and all the way along. As we take a look back to the chat here, we can see that Zoronic, hello to Zoronic in there. We will leave you alone, so the chats are working there. And Jeremy Debova is Navarro's dad. Well, thank you for clarifying that, Matt. That's from Matt Evans 91 in the Twitch chat there. Thank you for pointing that out. So we have father and son out on the circuit. So Debova, who's just jumped into the pits, being the father, and then Navarro being the son, as he gets it a little bit wrong there, going into turn 11 through Aquamirana. You could just see there how he got on the power too aggressively over the apex curve, and it just caused the rear end of the 911 to lift a bit too high, and as he tried to get the throttle down to go into 12, the car didn't want to bite in terms of going straight into the corner. Instead, the rear end needed time to settle down, and that's one of the things about Imola that makes it a very tricky circuit. It's a high octane circuit, albeit we've got a lot of significant braking zones here, but it's a high octane circuit in the fact that you are encouraged to really try and get the best possible run out of every single corner and charge down the hill towards each corner or uphill and then come into heavy braking zones. But because you're encouraged to get so aggressive on the throttle, sometimes you can just feel the rear end of the car. Alternatively, you can just feel that the car wants to understeer off if you're running something like the BMW M4 GT3, whereby front engine rear wheel drive, it will have more understeer than oversteer, and that's what's going to be in the mind of our drivers. Now, it should be pointed out that our drivers are running predefined tune setups here, so they're running more aggressive setups for the purposes of the sprint race, and then they're running alternate setups for the feature race, and that is going to play into hands as well. The cars are going to be quite different. We're going to be looking at lower downforce settings for the sprint race, so everybody's going to be encouraged to push as hard as possible, but in the feature race we're looking at high downforce setups on all of the cars, which is going to then make the cars grippier through the corners. But of course then apex speed becomes a huge factor, and having that confidence to get on the throttle just a tiny bit earlier than your competitor, because you will not have the ability to build up as much speed on the straight, particularly with more downforce on the cars. That means straight line speed is going to be reduced, and being in the slipstream, whilst it will be beneficial, it's not going to be perhaps as effective as if you were running a lower downforce setup. But we are really waiting now to get underway. In less than 10 seconds we should be changing over to the qualifying session. All of our drivers completing their current qualifying laps, I'll be expected to, and then peel back into the pits. But we do have, at the moment as it currently stands, we have 10 drivers. In fact, we have an 11th driver who's just arrived, and that is Jürgen Nockert, the Dutchman here in the Porsche 911. And again, another GT3 car. I believe everybody in fact is running a GT3 car at this time, as qualifying is now about to get underway. So everybody's going to frantically get themselves out on the circuit in very short order, and when they do, of course, it'll be a case of trying to find that track position and get yourself comfortably into some space in order to get underway. Now, the question you may be asking yourself here is, will our drivers try and find some slipstream for the purposes of qualifying, as we've also got Deschamps, who is here today. So we do have another driver who we haven't yet introduced. Here's Deschamps right now. The Dutch driver here, Jean-Louis, making his way down towards what is the first of the chicanes. And as he makes his way through the left into right combination, you can see they're riding a bit high on the apex and actually going over one of the black and orange bumps there. And that's just going to raise the wheel up even higher. And that's the thing that our drivers have got to be careful of. They want to attack those curves, but not too hard as to cause the car to lift. As we see there, Deschamps just getting it too aggressive going into the second of the chicanes, and the car just not responding, particularly on those cold tyres. As we also see that Colin Martin having a very similar effect there. Colin getting it very wrong, and as a result of that, both drivers reset into the pit immediately here. Fortunately for them, they're able to jump the car back to the pit, but it is a concern, as we need to double check that we are having some very slight issues with regards to trading paint. So we should see everybody's liveries update in very short order here, folks. My sincere apologies for that. So we should expect in due course everybody's livery should update. And thank you for pointing that out, Matt Evans. And there we go, we're starting to see them refresh. Not sure what happened there. I think there was just a slight technical bug, but we will have everybody's liveries now updated on the cars. Indeed, there we go. So that technical issue has been fixed. Getting all the gremlins out of the way before the main season kicks off. But with this qualifying session now definitely underway, it's about time that we jump on board with our drivers, and we're going to jump on board here with Nockert as he's making his way around and looking to put in a lap. So let's jump into the cockpit of the driver and give you a feel for what it's like in a qualifying lap in that Porsche 911 GT3. Well, in fact, he's not going to go for a qualifying lap. He backs off of it here to let another driver through. So we will not be following a lap through there, and instead it will be the case that we do have, I believe, that is... We've got Colin Martin right now making his way down towards what is Ravazza here, as we hear that Emmons not looking forward to the qualifying session, and it sounds as though perhaps the overall race as well. But as we jump on board here with Martin, as they make the way out of Ravazza, then we get underway with a qualifying lap. So, getting the best possible run he can out of turn 18. Through 19 he goes, the right-hander, and now building up the speed up into 5th gear and continue to build the speed up here in the German machinery, as he's now coming into 1 and then subsequently into Tamburello here. And it is going to be full attack into Tamburello, going into turn 2, the opening part of the chicane. And you can see here, riding a little bit, just clipping the curb there, but not attacking it too aggressively here, deciding to stay clear of overriding the curb as he comes out of 4 and now charges down towards 5. Into the Villeneuve chicane he goes. And coming down through the gears, down towards 3rd gear, riding over the apex curve of turn 5 nicely, but taking a little bit of a wider berth than he could through turn 6, not to cause the car to destabilise, and then coming up into Tosa chicane, not Tosa hairpin here, and as he comes out of turn number 7, a very nice run there, staying in 2nd gear, and then building up the speed, up into 3rd, going uphill here, so you want to upshift as late as possible, and now coming up into the double left-hand corner of Piratella, which is 9 through to 10, getting 9 very nicely hooked up there, and running it nice and wide as well, just using the track limits perfectly as he comes down to Aqua Minerale into turn 11, and you can just see how coming into the braking zone the rear end just goes on him and the car gets launched off the circuit as a result. And as we look behind in terms of the replay camera here, you can see just as he rode over the bump there, the rear of the car just didn't want to comply with Martin's inputs there, and as a result that's why the car just skidded across turn 12 into the gravel, and Martin will be aware of that and will be looking to set another lap as our opening times are starting to come in here. And as we reload our timing screens, they should come back online. We can see that Deschamps has taken a provisional pole so far with a 44.902, and we've got Sykes on a 45.8 so far. So those are the only 2 indicative times that have been set, although Debova has made his way, the more senior of the 2 Debovas, so Jay Debova here, making his way into provisional P2 of a 45.125 as he makes his way through Tamburello once again. And I think really at this case as well, because we've got a good amount of time in qualifying, we've still got 10 minutes to go, it's an opportunity for a lot of our drivers to build up just a little bit more track knowledge, just get a feel, get the tyres up to temperature. As we see there, Jay Debova just getting it wrong, coming out of the 2nd of the opening chicanes, out of that Villeneuve chicane, and you can just see so many of our drivers being caught out. The car just does not want to hook itself into the corners as much as they would like. As we see Sykes here coming through Aqua Minerale, and very nicely controlled that, and you can see where he's having to balance the fact the rear end is trying to come round through 11, the start of Aqua Minerale, into 12 and 13, as he now comes up into the Alta chicane here, so turns 14 and 15, riding high on turn 14 and then riding a little bit lower on turn 15. A nice run there from Sykes, albeit he's already up in all 3 sectors so far. What's this going to be from Sykes? A little bit down in the 4th sector, so we'll wait and see as that comes to an end, as a driver ahead of him gets out the way as he goes into Ravazza here for 17 and 18. He's going to make his way through 18 now, seeing himself just get it a little bit wide there on the exit curve of 17, but he was able to get back under control through the final corners. I think this is going to be an improved lap from the British driver as he comes across the line. In fact, it is going to be what is a 45.0, so a very good lap there, moving in within 1.5 tenths of Deschamps over the course of that qualifying lap. And we look around now and we can see that the younger of the 2 Dutchmen, in terms of Navarro Debova, the 2 Debova family members, we can see him coming across the line right now, and this is looking to be an improved lap from the Dutchman as he comes across the line. What's it going to be? It is going to be a 147.3, so this is his first indicative lap, and you can see he is a bit off the pace right now as more times are coming in from all of our drivers, but nobody right now able to take the challenge to Deschamps other than Sykes. Sykes being only 1.5 tenths off, and the more senior of the Debova family also being a tenth of a Sykes. We do have those drivers, and Emmons right now, it should also be pointed out, as we can see on our timing screens here, in the BMW M4 GT3 car, just making his way into Aqua Minerale. At this point, he is only the best part of 3 tenths off a provisional pole, so all of our drivers getting to feel with things, and as they do, those gaps are coming down quite significantly. Now you're probably wondering as well, is qualifying important in terms of the start of the race? Well, I can definitely say to you, at the case of Imola, it is. Now you're probably wondering, well, why is that? Well, look around you, look as we go around the circuit. We're going to stay looking at Emmons for a brief period of time. The number one theme that you'll notice here is that Imola is a very tight circuit, as in there's not much track width and there's only really one line through most of, if not all of the corners. All the corners around here, if you're not on the racing line going into and through the corner, you are going to lose time. So as a result, overtaking here can prove extremely difficult. And I think that's why a number of our drivers were perhaps not looking forward to this, just for the simple reason season, as we see Emmons there setting a 45.274, so it is not an improvement on his previous best, which is a 45.25, but he's very close to it and continuing to try and hunt down the leaders in terms of their pace. But as we continue to watch the British driver making his way around right now, the only BMW out on circuit to have set a indicative time, otherwise it's Porsches all the way. What we can see is that throughout, whilst we do have the runs into, say, the Villeneuve chicane and the Tamburello chicane, they're quite extensive runs. We've got some long straights and also the run up to Tosa, you've got the ability to put it down the inside. There's not enough room in order to be able to go for a huge overtake. You have to either be pretty much alongside your opponent going into the corner, or alternatively you have to hold off no big dive bombs, because the corner width just will not allow it. And particularly after you've come out the Tosa hairpin, you've got a long run all the way through down towards Aqua Minerale and then up to the Alta chicane, where there's not really a place to overtake typically. And that's what we're seeing right now as Emmons makes his way through 12 and 13. You can see how there's just no space as he goes a little bit sideways there coming out of Aqua Minerale. It's got a bit of traffic, but it's staying out of the way for him very nicely, and as he comes up into the Alta, we can see here into 14 and 15 he goes and getting it nicely planted there, and he's improved in sector 3 but down in sectors 1 and 2. So this lap right now not looking the best from Emmons, the British driver who we saw last time out at Catalonia in the test event, who put in a very good job. And as he comes down towards turns 17 and 18, we know that it's a lap right now where he's gone down in sector 4 as well. So I don't think this is going to be a major improvement from the British driver as he comes out the final corner and goes charging down towards the start-finish line. And what's this going to be from Emmons? It is going to be what was in the end. It's not an improvement, I'm afraid. It is a... well, it's not come up on our timing screens yet as his lap, so perhaps it was just a pace setting lap from Emmons and that's why it's not appeared, but we haven't got anything on our time screens. But Deschamps right now still holding on to that provisional pole. He's on an out lap as it currently stands of 44.902 and doing a very good job indeed of just getting himself up to speed, and he's going to go attacking onto a lap as he now makes his way down towards turn number 1 on his first flying lap after emerging from the pits. So we're going to see if he's able to improve, with Sykes currently in the pits, only 1.5 tenths down still on our provisional pole sitter. Coming into turn 2 then, going into the Tamburello chicane, and you can see they're very nicely planted but rode a little bit higher on the apex of turn 3 and clattered one of the bumps in terms of the black bumps there, but he's able to keep the car together and he's got good car composure, and I think that's what's giving him the pace here. As we see, he makes his way through Villeneuve and gets it nicely linked up, but he goes a little bit wide there out of turn 5, and that's going to cost him significant time, plus also the fact he'll have gravel on those left hand tyres is going to make any right hand corner just that little bit more difficult, or even straight line braking will be a bit more difficult because the left hand tyres will not want to cooperate as much initially. As we see, he makes his way now down towards the run through at 9 and 10, and as he goes through the double left hander here, it's going to be the case as we hear that Addy has improved and got himself up to a provisional P5 of 46.3. I think Deschamps is going to have to come back and do another lap, but we are having some more laps coming as we do see that, well, we have Van Hohennacker here setting what was a 46.7, putting in provisional a P6. We do still have some drivers we're waiting to get out on circuit, but as our drivers are continuing to make their way around the track, it is one of those cases right now where I think everybody just having a bit of difficulty with only 3.5 minutes to go, getting themselves all set and primed for their final qualifying laps, remembering the fact that with the lap time being 1 3/4 minutes, really our drivers have only got 2 more flying laps, as we see Van Hohennacker getting it wrong there out of turn 5. And in terms of improving right now, Addy really the best of the rest in P5 as it currently stands, and our top 4 all very close together. Emmons in P4 only separated from provisional pole by 3 tenths of a second, but can anybody else from P5 and below start to get into that mix for the front 2 rows? That'll be the question on their minds, of course, as we continue to watch Van Hohennacker making his way through 11 and up into 12 and 13 for Aqua Minerale. As we've had an off there, somebody has had a horrific off, and I believe that is Ndeboa, who just had a disastrous time at Aqua Minerale. So he goes through the corner here, attacks turn 11 way too hard, and the car just skidded across the apex of turn 12. But he got it back together in the end, and he was able to get it off the circuit so as not to impede other drivers. As we look back to Van Hohennacker now, coming towards the end of his lap, and it's not not an improving lap, and not really anybody improving significantly right now, as we see that Knockout has set a lap time, and that is in P9, what is a 47.4, and he is currently provisional P9, the last of our qualifying runners, as all our drivers are still trying to get in 1 or 2 more laps. And really now it's coming down to that final laps. I think Van Hoenacker will have time for 2 more laps if he's quick about it, but that was not a significant improvement. A 48.9 and not an improvement on his 46.7, which has been his best. And as for our provisional pole sitter right now, well, we see that Colin Martin only needed 1 opportunity and he seized it, a 44.882, only 200ths faster than Deschamps right now. But the British driver there making that BMW M4 work, and it is definitely paying off with the fact that right now holding on to the fastest lap, and he has improved considerably compared to where he was earlier in this qualifying session, as we do see that we've also got behind him right now, we've got Deschamps coming across the line. I don't think there's going to be an immediate response from the Dutch driver unless I'm very much mistaken. He comes across the line here and it is going to be a 45.5, so it is not an improvement as he makes his way down towards his final flying lap. And everybody now really on their final flying laps unless they're already halfway around the circuit, as we see Jay Debova making his way down towards the Ravazza corner here, and as he pushes all the way down the hill, he's got to go for Alta first, the 2 corners leading up to Ravazza, and coming downhill right now as we see more and more drivers here trying to get in their final laps. Debova improving at the moment. He's gone up in sectors 2 and 3, but down slightly in sector 1, and we'll look to see if he's able to improve any further. Sector 4 he was down a little bit, so he's approximately even with his previous best right now, his previous best being what was a 45.12, but as he comes out of turn 18 and up towards 19, it's going to be the case of staying all the way over to the right, straight lining it effectively to that timing line. And what's this going to be from the Dutchman? It's a 45.4, and it is going to be a significant improvement. In fact, it is a provisional pole. He's left it to last. It's a 44.3 in the end as registered our time screen. So a very strong lap there by the senior member of the Debova family. Deschamps has parked it in the pits, so no more laps from him. And can Martin improve and get himself onto pole position? Well, this is not going to be an improvement based on what we're seeing on our timing screen here. And as he comes across the line, it is definitely not an improvement. So Martin will go on to 1 more lap. In fact, he'll get a final lap in as Emmons comes across the line as well. But we've got to keep our eyes on Knockout here, who has just come across the line for a 46.4, moving him up to provisional P7 as all of our drivers are pushing around right now. And that is the end of qualifying. So anybody who is on a lap will now need to finish their lap. And Emmons, I think, will be kicking himself slightly because of the fact that right now he does have a little bit of traffic ahead of him, albeit it's not too close. But you can see there's approximately about a 1 second gap between himself and Knockout here as they're both on a flying lap. And you can see that Emmons deciding to park it, thinking there's nothing left in the tank. But what about Van Hoenacker? He's coming out of the final corners then, and as he comes around, what can he do to improve? Will it be an improvement? No, he jumped into the pit, so no more improvements from him. And will the senior member of the Debova family, he's not improving on this lap whatsoever, but Colin Martin, who is down in P3, he gets it wrong at turn 12 at Aqua Minerale, so Martin will not be improving from P3, and really the only lap left standing will be from Knockout here. He's up in sector 2, but did not improve in sector 1, and as he makes his way for Aqua Minerale, you can see just getting it a little bit loose on the exit of 12 there, and that's costing him the time as he comes up to the timing line for sector 3. He's down right now as he goes into the Alta chicane here. Through 14 and 15 he goes, and as he makes his way in towards into the Ravazza corner now, it's going to be the case here. I think this isn't going to be a potential challenge for pole position, but it will be a potential opportunity to get himself into the closer fight for the top 5, albeit if he could just jump Addy, for example. He's only 1/10 off of Addy right now and put himself P6. That would be a major advantage for him as he makes his way then down towards the timing line. What's this going to be from the Dutchman? He's going to come across very shortly, and it is a 47.8, which is, well, it says that 46.7 in fact, so it's not an improvement from the Dutchman there, and as a result, pole position goes to, in the end, Jay Debova with a 44.388, a phenomenal time there from the Dutchman, and securing pole position by 1.5 tenths over Deschamps, as we now wait to get underway with the race. Now, we did see in the qualifying session there just how hard it was for our drivers to get in a strong time. As we see Emmons commenting about the sausage curbs in the Twitch chat, and Ultra Gaming there on our YouTube channel saying that Jurgen's car looking pretty good. Now the question there for you, Jurgen, are you referring to, for Ultra with regards to Jurgen's car, are you referring to the paintwork or in terms of his driving, or both? Because he has been looking quite good all the way round Knockout, albeit he finds himself in the midfield as we're looking to get underway with the race very shortly indeed. And all of our drivers right now lining up for what will be the rolling start. And remember, race number 1, it's a sprint race. It is going to be a race that lasts 15 minutes. No pit stops required from all of our drivers. They'll be running low downforce setups made for speed. And that might just catch a couple of drivers by surprise here, in the fact that particularly when they're running in the dirty air of another driver, they're going to have even less downforce going into the corners. So perhaps some understeer. But we'll wait and find out as everybody is getting themselves set up right now. You see that the rolling start procedure will kick off just coming out of the auto chicane. As we see Katie Eames there saying that Emmons loves the sausage curve. Well, it may be one of his preferences. He does indeed seem to like to clatter the sausage quite a bit, but we'll wait to see what he's able to do in the race. As everybody's now getting themselves set, we're just waiting for a couple more cars to get themselves onto the rolling start lines. And just having it clarified for us there by Emmons, I believe it in fact now it is high downforce setups throughout the entirety of tonight, so not just in race number 2 but also in race number 1. But here is the grid for you, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody set in place. You can see there Debova taking that pole position by 1.5 tenths in the end over Deschamps, and then, well, Colin Martin only missing out by what was half a second from pole, and very closely followed by Sykes there. But as we see them all make their way down towards Ravazza right now, and all the drivers getting into that rolling start formation, we now look back to the race inside, and we can see that track temperature of 23 degrees centigrade. We're not expecting any rain here. It's going to be sunshine throughout, but all our drivers are getting ready and set, and it will be Jay Debova who takes us across that start finish line to commence the race. As we wait for the pace car to pull away, our drivers will line up in that rolling start formation, and it'll be lights out and away we go. And we are green and we're going racing, and Debova goes at the perfect time there. You can see just how he nailed the starting procedure, and as a result of that has been able to hold on to lead, and Deschamps getting caught sleeping a little bit there, as we can see that Martin in P3 find himself a good amount of space, and then we've got Addy up the inside of Sykes already into turn 4 and making a good move of it as they make their way through the first chicane and now down towards the Villeneuve chicane. And you can see that Sykes getting caught out a little bit there by Addy's overall position. So smart move from the British driver versus fellow countrymen, as behind them Emmons in P6 right now trying to find his way up the order, as we see a number of drivers going off, and Addy in particular getting it very wrong, and Addy into the wall coming out of the Villeneuve chicane. You can see his parts there on the grass, or almost into the wall, and we will take a look back at what happened to Matthew Addy very shortly. But right now, focusing on the action here, we can see that Van Hoenacker side by side with Emmons as they come up towards the left-hander of turn 9 here, and a little bit of contact, and Emmons knocks very wide indeed. He's since skidding across the circuit now. I think there was some contact as we see Knockout, Baker, all the drivers concertina in behind, and that was a disastrous incident. Let's take a look back what happened. So as you can see, as they come in towards the left-hander here, and this is how tight the circuit is, there was just a tiny touch there from what was at the time Knocker, and as a result, that's what sent the BMW driver of Emmons skidding across the circuit. I don't think there was any malice meant between the two of them, particularly from the Dutchman versus the Brit, but that is the thing about Imola, how tight it was, as we were saying earlier, as all of our drivers are now continuing around on the circuit there, albeit that has caused the pack to open up quite a bit, as we're hearing that Mark Baker has had a horrific incident somewhere around the lap, and we will take a look back at that very shortly as he's dropped down to P10 right now, as all of our drivers make their way out of the final 2 main corners before coming across that timing line. And after 1 lap, it is Jay Debova leading at the moment ahead of Deschamps, and then behind them it is C. Martin, as we can see that the drivers making their way across that timing line, and our top 3 separated by only a second. And then we've got a sizable gap of 2.5 seconds back to Van Hernacker in P4, who's got pretty much all the track to himself, because there is a 7-second gap to Knockaert in P5, and then we've got Emmons in P6 who's chasing after him after the incident between the two of them earlier on. Then Addy in P7, followed by Mark Sykes who's chasing after the position, now he's in P8, and then Debova into the pits with what looks to be a crippled car. And I'd love to know what has happened to Debova, because that car is looking broken as we take a look back. Coming down to Aqua Minerale here on lap 1, there was contact between himself and that looked to be the pink car. We're not sure who that was at the time, but the two drivers really coming together, and Debova through that damage and clattering the wall. The car's wounded and it's back into the pits there. And was that what we saw with regards to what was at the time? I believe that was Mark Baker. So when we said about Mark Baker having the crash, I believe that was, yep, that was Mark Baker who was stuck there, and then he had to try and get the car recovered. So as a result of that, Debova and Baker both falling down the order. But right now, looking back up at our leaders, I can tell you that the battle for the race lead is continuing, as we are hearing that Emmons is past Mark Sykes of P6, and indeed Addy has got himself up into that P7 as we saw earlier. But these are the closest guys really out on circuit right now, our top 3, as they're making their way to the end of lap number 2, and we jump on board with Colin Martin here as he continues to push forward. And you can see he's got a face full of Porsche in front of him, in fact 2 Porsches, and he'll be looking to try and get the BMW M4 around as quickly as possible to get himself back into the fight as they make their way across that timing line to go onto lap number 3. Now, of course, in Martin's position here, given the fact he is so far back by comparison to the guys in front, with Deschamps setting the fastest lap of the race so far at 44.779, he was only 4 thousandths faster than Debova on that previous lap. For Martin right now, I think it's a case of he just needs to bide his time and let the 2 Porsches in front of him start to fight one another, and then capitalise on things as they go. As we hear that Sykes has made the pass on Addy for P7. How did that transpire, you ask? Well, here it is. As he's making his way then down onto lap number 3, you can see just simply had the overspeed going down into the Tamburello chicane, and as they go into left-hander of turn 2, which kicks off the chicane, a nice move up the inside, a classical move up the inside, and he got it done. As I'm hearing that Navarro Debova has had another major incident, we will come and have a look at that shortly, as we see right now our race leaders who are looking at Deschamps all over the back of Jay Debova as they make their way through the left-hander there, and now coming down in towards Aqua Minerale once again, and no overtaking opportunities now as they go through 11 through to 13, and this is where Deschamps has to aim to stay as close as possible to his belligerent ahead of him as they make their way out of 13 and up towards the Alta chicane. Now, the idea for Deschamps, he wants to be within approximately 3 tenths of a second, if not less, coming out of Ravazza at turns 17 and 18. That will give him the momentum onto that start-finish line to go attacking down into the Tamburello chicane on turn 2. But of course, as we can see here, but Jay Debova having a much better run out of the chicane, and that's opened the gap up by 4 tenths just through those 2 corners alone. And this seems to be the story right now of the 2 of them, that we have Deschamps, who is faster on the opening half of the lap, but then it's Debova in the second half of the lap who's just able to open that gap up, as we're hearing there's been a crash for Mark Baker. So here's Mark Baker right now coming down towards Aqua Minerale on lap number 3. As he comes down into the corner here, the car rear end just comes away, and as we've seen so many times from our drivers tonight, and he's fallen victim to the very difficult corner once again, as we are hearing that Colin Martin has in fact gone into the pit lane here, and I'm not sure what's happened to Martin. Is there damage on the car or something along those lines as he's pulled into the pit, and that is going to be a case of he's going to drop all the way down the order. But enough hopping back and forth, as we have heard that there's been an incident for Navarro Debova. We talked about that earlier, but that was quite some time back now on lap number 2, and we stay focused on the racing action ahead, as we hear that Emmons right now making his way closer and closer to the back of Knockaert. What with all the drivers behind P3 being promoted a position, what with Martin pitting, I believe that might actually be a retirement for Martin right now, as they continue to make their way around the circuit, and Emmons doing everything he he can in order to try and get as close as possible to the back of Knockout. And again, remember, as we said earlier, there's not really an overtaking opportunity right now until he finds a way past into potentially Ravazza or otherwise on the start finish straight. And it's all here about Emmons trying to stay as close as possible to the Porsche Knockout in front. And really, you're going to see here as they go for Aqua Minerale the two differences between the cars. And oh my goodness, and that is Knockout getting it very wrong, and Emmons just giving Knockout a tiny tap on the rear end. There was no mass, and you can see he's lifted out of it immediately. But as a result of that, look who's jumped up through the order. Sykes now up into P5, and he's going to be looking to potentially capitalise on getting past his fellow Porsche driver Knockout, who's gone very deep into Alta chicane. In fact, he's gone double deep, and there's contact between Emmons and Knockout through the chicane. I think at that point, Knockout was just thinking he could get back on the racing line and didn't see that Emmons was going to try and squeeze his way through as well, as both drivers are able to get underway once again. And that was a tiny little lock between the two drivers, but as a result of that, Matthew Addy now up into P5 as he makes his way down to Ravazza here, goes a little bit deep however into 17, and Sykes recovering to P4 after starting on the second row. He fell down the order quite a bit with all the opening battles and getting caught sleeping a little bit perhaps at the race start, but really starting to build up a bit of pace. But a lot of our drivers being caught out with how tight it is around here, and indeed just those tiny little knocks as we see the Emmons into the pit from what was at the time P6. And I think there may be some damage to the car and he may not be continuing, but what I can tell you is that Martin has got the car back out on the circuit. Him and the team have got the car back out. It's down in P9. What can he do with half the race remaining? We're at the halfway point as this point in time. Can he get himself back up the order, and will it be the same for Emmons? Will he be retiring the car, or will he be chasing after the drivers in front, albeit with quite a time deficit? As you can see here, once again, Deschamps now making his way closer and closer to the back of Jay Debova here, and I think it may have been the case as we hear that Emmons is coming out of the pits. He's dropped down to P8. He's dropped behind Baker, but he's going to be coming back out. I think with our race leaders, Jay Debova is just in that comfortable place right now. He's not under too much pressure, but at the same time, he's not feeling this overly difficult situation of whereby he needs to pull away. I think he's just controlling the pace, and Deschamps is trying to find a way to get back into this race and try and get that pressure back on the Dutchman in front of him. Of course, both of them being fellow countrymen, and as a result of that, it's a bit of national pride on the line. They'd love to make it a Dutch 1-2 in this race, I'm sure, but at the same time, I'm sure that Jean-Louis here would absolutely love to make it a win rather than a P2 as he makes his way out to turn 18, and you can see he's had a much better run this time by comparison with Debova ahead of him. And both drivers here in the Porsche GT3s looking very strong indeed as they make their way down towards turns 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, coming up towards the Tamburello chicane, then 2, 3, 4 all ahead and under braking. You can see just how much Deschamps is catching up, as there's a mistake there from Bova as he goes a bit wide and cuts over the track at turn number 3 there, and as a result that's going to cost him a huge amount of momentum as they go down to the Villeneuve chicane. It's going to be Deschamps on the outside, it's going to be Bova on the inside here, and Bova going very defensive into 4. I think just naturally expecting that he'll be able to start to build up that lap time once again after Tosa. But as they come up into the turn 7 hairpin here, you can see how Debova having to go for those tight lines is just giving himself exposition to Deschamps having the potential undercut or the cut back into the corner, but not able to get it there, Deschamps, but looking very feisty indeed as they make their way now up in towards turns 9 and 10. Into the double left-hander they go here, and I think here Deschamps will fall back a little bit, not too much. I think he'll feel he's got the confidence, he's got the momentum now as they go into Aqua Minerale. Into 11 they go, and this is where it is so critical for Deschamps not to make a mistake. He needs to nail this sequence. If he can nail it and keep this space between himself and Debova going into Ravazza, then he is going to be in an overtaking position come the start-finish straight going on to the next lap. So they both make their way through the left-hander here, and as they do on lap number 6 as it currently stands, you can see Deschamps just falling back a little bit, losing 2 tenths there, but not as much as he has previously, as we are hearing right now that Martin and Emmons both trying to charge up the field as rapidly as possible, but Martin all over the back of Emmons. But we're not looking at it right now. We're focusing on the battle for the lead because it could kick off at any moment as we look at our race leader once again, and they make their way out the final corner, and you can see just how difficult it's proving for Debova, as I think this time it's going to be an opportunity for Deschamps to go all the way around the outside of 19 across the timing line onto lap 7 they go, and they're side by side. It's going to be a drag race down towards the opening chicane, down towards Tamburello here as they head up towards the left-hander into the braking zone they go. It's going to be Debova on the inside, on the outside, Deschamps on the inside, but it's the case that Debova has the outside, he has the racing line, and Deschamps has no way to siphon himself up the inside, and he has to back out of it. But it's definitely the case that the leading Dutchman right now really under a lot of pressure as they continue to make their way around. And we hear that Colin Martin has passed Matt Evans for P8 out on circuit, and we will have a look at that very shortly. But this battle for the lead is continuing. We have approximately 3 laps to go, including the lap our drivers are currently on, and I think it is going to be the case. It is going to come down to a last lap attack if Deschamps is going to pick up the win here. He'd love to get it, of course, as he's all over the back of the race. Oh, and he's got it very wrong, and the car's gone flying off the circuit. What on earth has happened there? I think there was a little bit of grass contact there going into turn 9 for Deschamps, and that is him all the way down the Horder as Van Hoenacker now jumps up to P2. And let's take a look back at what happened to the Dutchman here as he went into turn number 9. So you can see there, although the camera angle was not accurate, the rear right-hand tyre just went onto the grass as he tried to brake for the corner, and that's what led to him going off the circuit. As I'm now hearing that we've had a major incident for Mark Sykes. What has happened to him here? Well, he went off the... Well, that's not Mark Sykes. My apologies, folks. We're just going to try and see what happened. Mark Sykes going down into turn 9, and the rear end of the car, he went a bit deep, tried to turn in, and the car said no, and instead decided to point in the wrong way. So Sykes there, having had a consistent race now, dropping down to P5. But what I can tell you is with all that happening, Colin Martin has indeed got himself up to P8 ahead of Matt Emmons as they make their way around the circuit. Currently on what is lap number 7, they're making their way out towards Toaster right now. You can see Emmons behind Martin at the rear of the camera shot there as they're making their way into the uphill braking zone, and now they're pressing on. But meanwhile, trying to recover his way into P2 is Deschamps after that disastrous lap, and as he makes his way into turn 2, can he find a way past Van Hoenacker? We've got three Dutchmen right now, it should be pointed out, contesting the podium, and we see that Deschamps technically the faster driver out the two of them, but Van Hoenacker just keeping it together right now. As off in the distance you can see that De Boer just pulling away 9 seconds up the road, not under threat. But as they look into the Villeneuve chicane here, it's the case that Deschamps can't find a way through, but he's trying to put as much pressure as humanly possible on the guy in front of him, as he's right to do so. And with only a lap to go after this one, he'll want the P2 man to make a mistake here, or otherwise he's going to need to be as close as possible coming out of Ravazza in order to go for the move as they make their way onto that start-finish straight to complete the race in terms of completing the final lap after this one. As they make their way through turn 9, and then we can see that we're hearing that Colin Martin's had an off on the circuit right now, but staying with the action here, we note that going into Aqua Minerale, no change so far, but Deschamps the closest he's ever been to Van Hoenacker as they make their way out of turn 12, and you can see there how Van Hoenacker just having a very difficult time out of the corner as they now make their way out towards Alta. And will Deschamps look down the inside into the chicane? He sort of thinks about it, he just puts his nose in a tiny bit, then backs out at the last moment, recognising the fact he's trying to make Van Hoenacker make a mistake here, as we see that Emmons and Martin trading places, and we will take a look at what's happened between the two of those very shortly as Martin holds on to the P8 right now. But as they come down in towards turn 17, it's no change at the moment, but will Deschamps be able to do it? If he's going to do it, it's going to be coming out of here and going on to the next lap as they make their way onto the final lap of this race. With under a minute to go, they're only going to get in one more lap. It will be an 8th and final lap, and they go onto it as we speak. So as they build up that speed down towards the Tamburello chicane, it's going to be Deschamps parking it around the outside. Van Hoenacker defending to the inside. He's going to try and go on the race line as Deschamps as they go into the braking zone. Can he go all the way around? He looks for it, and he's going to be on the inside for turn 3. A brave move there from Deschamps, and he's up into P2. A brilliant stuff from the Dutchman, but will we see a return from Van Hoenacker here as they make their way down in towards the Villeneuve chicane? He looks to the inside now, but it's the case, I think, that it's all said and done as Deschamps has recovered to P2, but he's got a 9.5 second gap to overhaul to our race leader, and I don't think he's going to be able to achieve it. But meanwhile, what I can tell you is that Martin versus Emmons will take a look back at their battle for what was at the time P8, which Martin is currently holding on to. So here's the battle, ladies and gentlemen, as they went on to lap number 8, and you can see that it was Martin versus Emmons as they both made their way into the right-hander there, and as they came also into the left-hander, and then it was the case that Emmons had to back out of it as they came out of the chicane and headed down towards Villeneuve. So no overall change for position, but a lot of pressure being put on between both drivers as they come to the end of this lap and go on to that final lap. But speaking of that final lap, he's led this one from start to finish effectively. He's held off the pressure. He's just got only 3 more corners to go as he makes his way down into turn 17 right now. Jay Debova has done everything he needs to do, and he's done it right in the sprint race here. 1 more main corner to go, and then just the right hand kink as he makes his way out of the final corner. And it is going to be the case that Jay Debova is going to win the opening sprint race of tonight's test event at Imola. Well done to the Dutchman, winning in the end by 9.2 seconds clear of Deschamps, who comes around right now. A valiant effort contesting for the race win, but a mistake going into turn 9, costing the ability to keep the charge on against Debova, but a P2 all the same, as Van Hohenlacker is going to come across the line in P3. A brilliant podium in the end, a very tumultuous race for the P3 driver here, but it's going to be a Dutch podium all the way round. Matthew Addy will come across the line in P4 with Mark Sykes in P5, and then it's going to be Jürgen Nocker who comes around the final corner to complete our top 6 as he comes across the line here. And then it is going to be a 24-second gap down towards Baker, who is making his way down to Ravazza right now, having had a very difficult race to begin with, but he's going to make his way out the final 2 main corners and then into 19. And it will be one of those moments to forget for Baker, albeit he can say that he's made a good recovery drive of it, but he'll be looking to resurge in the feature race as he comes across to take the checkered flag for P7. And as he does so, Martin, meanwhile, holding on to P8 in the end. It wouldn't have been the battle that he wanted, but it was a very difficult race for both himself and Emmons, but he was able to beat the other BMW M4 driver here as he makes his way across the finish line. The BMW's not having a good opening race, but they make their way across the line. Martin in P8 and Emmons in P9, and then it is going to be Navarro Debova who finishes in P10, albeit in the pit lane, having retired the car early on in the race. And as our drivers are just on their cool-down lap right now, congratulations to Jay Debova there. He'll be very pleased as he's been able to hold on to that win. But of course, what this does mean as well is that as we go into the feature race in approximately 15 minutes time, we will be looking at a reverse grid. So that means that our winner in the sprint race, Jay Debova, will be starting right at the back, and it will be his son who's going to be starting at the front of the grid with Emmons alongside him as he pulls into the pit lane, as does Deschamps here. And Deschamps staying as close as possible to the back of Jay Debova there on the cool down lap. I think trying to get the message through to his fellow countrymen: look, I made one mistake, I'm going to be on your heels in race number 2. I can assure you of that. We'll have to wait and see, of course, what those drivers will have to fight their way through the field in order to go hunting down the race win. As Van Hohenlacker making his way now towards the pits, as is Addy. And Addy having a good race, dropped down the order at the start, but keeping it clean for the most part after a difficult start, bringing home that P4. He'll be best pleased with that. And Sykes as well, not having the perfect race, but definitely starting to iron out some of the issues. And Imola looking a stronger track for the British driver, coming home in that P5. Knockout. Again, one of those races I think for Knockout to learn from. He definitely will, as he parks up there coming out of what is turn number 18 by looks of things. The car just seemingly stopping, and Baker coming across the line instead as both drivers go into the pits, and then Martin having already returned to the pits by looks of things, and it will be Emmons who will be the final driver to pull into the pits. And really, I think for Emmons, while these ones where, as we heard in the Twitch chat before he went into the race, not looking forward to racing around here, and indeed it was a difficult one for him, but I'm sure he'll look to bounce back in race number 2, and it'll be quite a different race in the second race, of course, what the fact we have 4 times the race distance, and we have that all-important mandatory pit stop, where our drivers will be required to take on fuel. Whether they choose to take on tyres or not, that's entirely up to them, but they will have to take on fuel as part of a pit stop in that race, and that will throw things wide open as all of our drivers are now into the pits. What a fantastic race number 1, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be back in approximately 14 minutes time for race number 2, but until then we're going to take a brief break, and we'll see you all very soon. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and that was another sponsor video from our sponsor, Apex Racing Academy. Remember, if you are interested in seeing what the Apex Racing Academy can do for you as an iRacing driver, be sure to check them out at apexracingacademy.com. But still, outside of that, as we come back to the circuit, it's now the case that we're getting ready to get underway with race number 2. Now, we are running a little bit behind schedule, that should be pointed out. That was because we've just been ironing out some technical issues, but as you can see, we are still at the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari, or Imola in short, and we'll be getting underway with that feature race, the 60-minute feature race with a mandatory pit stop in a very short period of time. Now, our drivers just getting in their final warm-up practice before we get underway with this second race of the evening. It's worth pointing out that we also should give a quick shout out to our second sponsor, and that is the sponsor of at the end of the day, Next Level Racing, who support us in running these sessions and in running this series, and we're grateful to have them on board. It's good to have them here with us, of course, helping us bring these series to you, alongside Apex Racing Academy, and also a number of our other sponsors, including Grid Engineering. We've also got Faster, we've also got Mark Sykes Photography and Imagery. We've got a good number of sponsors supporting us here, and a shout out to all of them in helping us make this possible. Grid Finder as well. You name it, they're with us and they're on the right hand side. If you do want to check them out on their respective web pages, you can take a look using Google, of course. But after seeing race number 1, and really our key takeaways from race number 1, the main one being that there's not really any space to overtake outside of some very predetermined overtaking areas, and the big challenge for all of our drivers in particular is to get a strong run out of Ravazza and then down onto the start finish straight down towards the Tamburelli chicane. If they can do that, then they're in a bit of a good chance of overtaking. As we say hello again to everybody tuning in via Facebook, YouTube, alternatively Twitch, particularly Zeronic, and we can also see on Facebook there Matt Emmons replying to KT Eames saying that he was hungry to take a nip at the sausage curb. But still, as we go into race number 2, expect that this one's going to be revolving quite significantly around the slipstream and also in terms of the strategy. The strategy being a critical part, because if you find yourself caught up behind a driver in front, then it's the case that perhaps coming in for an early pit stop may enable you to jump them, but of course it's a gamble, because then you may make your second stint longer than your first. So that'll be a concern, particularly where it comes to tyre wear. And with the braking zones here at Imola being quite heavy, and also the fact we've got a number of sweeping corners to the Aqua Minerale, as we just saw Colin Martin make his way through 11 through to 13, that can put some additional wear through the tyres that you may not want, and just push you a little bit beyond your limit in terms of what the tyres are able to take. But we are just getting the remainder of our drivers in. The practice session will conclude in 30 seconds time, we're just under 30 seconds time, and then we will have everybody in here ready to go and underway for race number 2. And at this point in time, we do have 6 drivers in the lobby, and we're hoping to see some more on that starting grid, potentially looking at approximately 10 once again. We've also got the return of Jürgen Nockert, of course. After picking up that solid result in race number 1, he'll be looking to back that up in race number 2, but he'll be starting towards the back, of course, given the fact that it is the reverse grid, and the driver who'll be starting right at the back was our winner in race number 1, that being Jay Debova, as he makes his way down towards turn number 1, and the grid is about to be set for the race. So we wait until the grid will be set, as everybody gets reset backwards to the rolling start positions, and those rolling start positions, of course, being just before Ravazza. So you can see the grid being formed up here, and as we wait for all of our drivers to get in, we can just see the grid being listed. We're going to have 9 drivers taking part in race number 2, and it will be Navarro Debova, the younger of the 2 Debova family members here today, father and son. It is the son who will be starting on pole, and he'll be joined alongside by Matt Emmons after a very difficult race number 1, finishing in that P9 position. Colin Martin started in P3, and alongside him will be Mark Baker. You've then got Nockert and Sykes lining up on row number 3, and there'll be Addy and Van Hohenacker on the 4th row of the grid, and then Jeremy Debova starting at the back. He will have to do it all to get through the order and potentially make it 2 wins out of 2 tonight. Can he do it? That'll be what we're asking ourselves throughout the entirety of this race, but we'll see what he's able to achieve as the rolling start procedure is about to get underway, and it will be the sun this time who determines the pace as they all start to creep around. Now place your bets, ladies and gentlemen, as we can see And that we can see that KTE's enjoying the concept of the full reverse grid as they all make their way down to Ravat. So then into turn 17 they go, and it will be the Porsche of Bova who will be figuring out the pace and looking to try and get the jump on everyone. As we see Emmons there going a little bit wide through 17, just giving himself space and giving Bova space, but of course not too deep. And is he going to go quick, or is he going to bog down himself? We saw a fantastic start from the father. Can the son repeat it and follow in his father's footsteps? And it's lights out and away we go for the race then as all of our drivers get underway. And you can see that Bova having a very difficult start compared to Colin Martin, who's had the best start of all of them. And Emmons, in fact, having a very weak start. Martin jumping up 2 places if he can get around the outside of Bova here into turn 2. And he does. Colin Martin with a phenomenal pair of passes. And already getting away as Emmons side by side here with Bova as they make their way down towards the Villeneuve chicane here. And Emmons up into P2. Nocket coming through in P3. And Bova going down the order as Sykes tries to go the long way round. He does through Villeneuve, and Bova at this point, as we see, I think that was Nocket who's had it horrifically wrong. He's dropping down the order, as is Bova as well into the wall. So a number of crashes here and incidents as they all make their way out towards Tosa, and we will take a look back at exactly what has happened. But a lot of change as Sykes as well having a horrific incident, and in fact Nocket crashing into the side of him, I'm hearing. But up front at the moment it is the case that Colin Martin having the best start of anyone and just disappearing off up the road, having a phenomenal start, and Emmons following through and pretty hoping that he could have been the one to have the start of Martin, those two being rivals of course, and both in the BMW machinery and looking to do their best in the M4 GT3. As we see here that Addy right now making his way up towards the auto chicane, and really the best of the rest in P3 right now, but he's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders from Van Hoenacker in P4 and Bova in P5. And Jeremy having a good start to the race. He's got himself up halfway through the order, what of the incidents that have occurred around him, and looking to continue that momentum as he makes his way down into turn number 17. As we hear already, it is a retirement for Mark Sykes, returning to the pits, not even able to complete a lap. That is very unfortunate for the British driver, and it has not been a good day for Sykes as they make their way around. And we see here Van Hoenacker with the damage on the front of the car as he makes his way down towards turn number 3. And we also see that Nocket making a jump to the pits there. So a lot of drivers having a disaster start. Nocket and Sykes are both in the pits as Bova, the younger of the two, Navarro, making his way into the pits as well. I assume this is going to be to repair the car. As they make their way onto lap number 2, then it is Colin Martin leading right now by 2.7 seconds over Matt Emmons, and then it is Bova, the older of the two, in P3, followed by Van Hoenacker in P4. Then it is Addy in P5 with Baker chasing after him in P6, and then at this time we have got Bova coming into the pits right now. Knockout has retired from the race, and Mark Sykes as well parked up in the pits, and I believe retiring or just waiting there to get back out on circuit. But I suspect that is going to be a retirement because it was a jump to the pits. But let's take a look back, what with the order spacing out a little bit, at what happened to a number of our drivers on that opening lap. There were a lot of incidents, and we'll start off with a positive, which was the phenomenal pass by what was Colin Martin, getting himself all the way up the order. So you'll see here at the start that Bova and also Emmons just having a very delayed start, and you can see that Martin just went between and went for the Moses manoeuvre, and then was brave to go around the outside of Bova into turn 2, but he made it work and then just started to pull away as Emmons had to clear Bova, and the two of them were side by side into Villeneuve. But as we come back to the racing for the time being, we can see that all the order has spaced out, although by looks of things Baker has actually jumped quite a way up the order, and Addy has had a crash quite recently. So let's see what happened to Matthew Addy here as he's coming down into Aqua Minerale. Is it the standard one where the rear of the car goes? It looks as not quite, but he just went too deep into turn 12 and the car got caught on the gravel, and he had to park it up to let the driver behind go and also get the car settled down. So that's what happened to Addy as he continues to make his way round right now. But otherwise, with the gaps open up between our drivers, it's also a good time for us to take a look back at what happened with regards to Navarro Bova, who had to go to the pits. So this was on lap number 1, of course. He was battling at this time with Sykes going down into Villeneuve, and Addy tried to also come around the outside, but going into 5 here, we can see, well, it was Van Hoenacker who had a disastrous run, and it was Bova who just carried too much speed, and the car understeered off. Meanwhile, Van Hoenacker, who was ahead at this time, this is what happened to him. Well, that wasn't him. In fact, it was just him running off the circuit here, but Sykes having a disastrous run up the hill there into the wall, so he got it wrong coming off the corner. Everybody just getting it seemingly wrong, and I think it was Nocket Nokia, in fact, who ended up in the wall coming out of turn number 5 on lap number 1. But that is the summary there. So a number of drivers really being caught out by the cold tyres, and the Villeneuve chicane just punishing them relentlessly. And that's just within the opening half of the first lap of the race. You have to imagine we're going to expect plenty more from our drivers going deeper and deeper into the race, as we see that Mark Sykes has left the pit lane, so he's been able to get the car back out there. But he is a lap down our leaders right now, but he is back out on circuit. So they've been able to get the car repaired, and the British driver is underway once again. He'll be fuming, of course, with what happened on the opening lap, but still he's carrying on valiantly all the same, and this is what you love to see. And Sykes is a man who digs deep and continues to push on, and we hope to potentially see him gain a couple of places by just keeping it together, because he is looking quite strong here at Imola. It's just the case now he's a lap down on the leading lap, and he's got to find his way back into the action, as we see that Van Hoornaker's had a brief off around on track on lap number 3. And as we look a little bit further back, in fact it is the case that Van Hoornaker has jumped to the pits with a heavily wounded car here. So you remember that Van Hoornaker having that disastrous opening lap. He was the car that we saw go charging off at turn number 5, and that's where he currently sits, just in the pits right now. A lot of drivers having a nightmare race here at Imola. Imola being relentlessly punishing to everybody, and the gaps between drivers have opened up considerably so far. But still, that's not to say we can't expect great racing with 55 minutes of an hour's race to go. But it does seem to be as though all the drama is happening nice and early on. Knockout is also still parked in the pit, so Knockout has retired the car as we understand it. So it is Sykes who's now up into P7, what with Van Hoornaker having jumped to the pits, and we'll wait to see if the Dutchman is able to get the car back out. But we're not going to be expecting a Dutch podium this time around. Unfortunate, of course. I'm sure the Dutch contingents tuning in right now would be jumping up and down in joy if they could have a double Dutch on the podium. But still, we see that Colin Martin leading right now and pulling away from Emmons by a gradual amount on the previous lap. Colin Martin a 44.78, Emmons a 44.81, just gradually opening up a gap by a couple of hundredths a lap. I think the British driver will be very pleased with how this is going right now, with the fellow Brit behind him trying to chase after, of course, and it'll be a battle, both in equal machinery, of course, both running identical setups, high downforce setups in these cars, and looking to catch up as quickly as possible is Emmons. But I think it's going to be a case of they're stronger at respective corners and parts of the circuit, and that is going to factor into this, of course. Now, I should point out in the background, ladies and gentlemen, that whilst this racing is going on, where I'm currently broadcasting this from, we are due to expect a thunderstorm within the next hour, or perhaps even sooner. So if we do suddenly lose the stream, we have had a couple of power surges already, but if the stream does cut out for any reason, that will be due to a power surge and a subsequent power cut on the grid in where I'm currently located. So if you wonder why the stream suddenly disappears, it's that. It's not because I've been kidnapped or decided to walk away from the commentary box early. I'm sure of that, as we see Jay Debova right now setting the fastest at a 44.584, and really starting to build up the pace is the Dutchman, really chasing after the positions right now, and with everybody around him having a disaster compared to himself. It's going to be his consistency, I think, which is key. He's 3.8 seconds off of Emmons, and to give you an idea right now, over that previous lap, Emmons was on a 45.37, Debova was on a 45.58, so taking 8 tenths out of him. But I think Emmons did make a mistake on that lap, but it is the case that the Dutchman right now is charging and looking to hunt down that top step. He's not far away. He's only got a 7.5 second gap to the race leader right now, so it's not impossible, and he's got the time to catch it up. Will he do it? That is the big question as we look a little bit further back, and we can see that Baker right now in a little bit of a position of his own and just making his way through turn 9, and Baker having had that very difficult opening race. Of course, race number 1, it all went from good to bad to disastrous to nightmare for Baker, but this time in P4 right now, 11.5 seconds off of the leaders, and just trying to keep it together as he gets it through Matt Aquaminerale. They're running a little bit tighter off of turn 12 than perhaps you'd normally like, but we've seen a number of times drivers, including Baker himself, being caught out by Aquaminerale, and I think just trying to find a nice consistent line where he's not pushing the limits too hard. And I think that's one of the things as well for a number of our drivers. They will, in the sprint race, recognise the fact that they're trying to push through certain corners too hard in a sprint race, which is understandable, of course, given the fact that in the sprint you've only got that 15 minutes, so you've got to make every lap and every second count. Whereas in the feature race here, you have that more open window. You've got a much longer period of time just to keep it together as he makes his way out to turn 18. Out of Ravazza he comes, and onto another lap, heading out onto lap number 5. Addy, meanwhile, in the Porsche 911 GT3 as well, just making his way across the timing line. He's already a couple of laps down on the rest of the drivers in terms of that pace, not in terms of the overall laps on track, but you can see that gap opening up very gradually between himself and Baker. It's now opened up to 6.5 seconds, and really it has been over the last couple of laps in particular, just experiencing that pace differential. To give you an idea on that previous lap, well, in fact, an identical lap to Baker on that previous one, so perhaps Addy just finding his feet a little bit and getting his rhythm back in here. So let's not count out the P5 driver, the Brit, right now, but again, just finding that pace and getting himself sorted out, as we hear that there has been something that's happened here, and in fact that it is the case that Addy has passed Baker. Now what has happened to Baker? So coming down to Villeneuve, he's going to go through 4, but he goes wide of 4, and the rear end of the car just over-rotates, oversteer through the corner, and he's into the wall. And that's how Addy picked up the position there. I was going to say, seeing Addy jump up into P4 suddenly, that's unexpected, but another victim to the Villeneuve chicane. A lot of drivers falling victim to it, and it's really our top 3 right now who are in a world of their own and seemingly holding it together. And it's a question of who wants to hold on to P4 or be the best of the rest. I think that's really what's going through the minds of a lot of drivers as they're making their way around the circuit still. Now Navarro, meanwhile, Endeboa, making his way down towards what is at this point in time the Tosa hairpin, coming up into turn number 6. Now remembering that he is 32 seconds, well 31.5 seconds off of Baker as it currently stands, but he'll be looking to get his way back in there, and Sykes gradually catching up to the back of Debova, albeit he's still got 1 minute and 11 seconds to catch up, Sykes in P7, but don't count him out, as we have had confirmation that both Van Hoenacker and Knocker have retired, so we have already lost 2 cars out of our opening 9, and we are down to 7 drivers, as we see Martin right now going on to what is his 7th lap, and leading still by 3.8 seconds as it currently stands. The gap between himself and Emmons oscillating at the moment, not really opening up but not really closing up either, and we can see the same with Jeremy Debova in P3 in the chase versus Emmons, the man who you can see on screen right now. All 3 drivers staying within approximately 4 seconds of one another in terms of each gap, so 4 seconds or a bit less between Emmons and Martin, and then 4 seconds or slightly more between Jay Debova and Emmons right now, and I think that's how it's going to stay for a bit of time until we start to get to the end of this opening stint, as I'm hearing that Addy has had a disastrous run out of Villeneuve here, and he's pulled back onto the circuit. He will have some cars coming up behind him, and it is going to be, I believe that is Baker behind. That's not Baker behind. I think that's Sykes trying to cut his way through the field here and trying to unlap himself in the pursuit of what is effectively the P4 through to P6 positions. But he is a lap down as it currently stands on both Baker and Addy. He's already unlapped himself off of Baker, and he's unlapped himself off of Endebova, of course. And now if he can do the same versus Addy, then all he's got to do over the remaining 45 minutes approximately is get himself back around and onto the back of these guys. And I reckon he could do it. To give you an idea, his previous lap was a 46.61, whereas in the case of Addy it was a 46.53, but this lap, of course, with that mistake from Addy, will be severely compromised, so do not count out Sykes right now. He is continuing to push, and it is definitely showing, and by comparison with Baker, well, Baker on his previous lap 46.9 and Sykes was a 46.61, so 3 tenths faster was Sykes by comparison with Baker, and it all adds up lap on lap, so we'll wait and see, of course, whether the British driver is able to gain it, as he makes a little mistake, a little lock up under braking into the first part of Ravazza there, and he just managed to get the car settled, just pushing it hard here, and you can definitely tell Sykes knows he can potentially get himself back onto that lead lap versus the battle for P6 up to P4, as we look back to our leaders right now, and Martin just having a very peaceful time of it, no pressure on the British driver here at this time, as Emmons now 4 seconds down the road, and Debova actually starting to catch up to Emmons a little bit. On that previous lap, a 44.5 for Debova, a 44... My apologies, it was a 44.9 for Debova, and then it was a 45.7 for Emmons. So Emmons, I think, making a little bit of a mistake somewhere out on the circuit, but I should also point out that Colin Martin on a 45.12 there, so it may have been a mistake for Emmons, but it was also, I think, one of those instances where Debova is really starting to get into the rhythm as our drivers continue to make their way round, and we can see that Debova getting closer and closer to Emmons. The gap now only 3 seconds as they make their way out of Alta and down towards Ravazza once again. And continuing to push around, of course, so you may be wondering at this point, okay, so what are the drivers going to be thinking about right now? It's going to be a case, I think, that for a number of the drivers, it's about maintaining that consistency, but also for Evans and Martin in particular, they'll be needing to think about, okay, when do I pit in relation to my peers? And really, Jay Debova is the one in the commanding position here because he can dictate the pit stops of the drivers in front of him. Let's say, for example, if Jay Debova right now decided he was going to pit after 20 minutes, that would mean that he'd have the fresher tyres initially and of course the fuel to go to the end, or at least we would assume he has the fuel to go to the end. Then it means he can start to use that better rubber in order to chase down the guys in front. Now the guys in front in return have to think, right, do I go into the pits in order to counter what Debova's doing, or do I alternatively go longer than Debova and play the fact out that I'm going to have the fresher tyres come the end of the race versus Debova, but I may lose track position, as we are hearing that Evans has actually had an off. And as a result of that, as Debova makes his way through, I think Evans has had a disaster going into Tosa here. Let's find out what happened to Evans, because that is not good news. So going through Villeneuve, then you can see he went out onto the gravel and slightly clipped the wall down the exit of Villeneuve, and the car got pulled into the wall. And well, it was just a case of doing a significant amount of rallycross and gradually eking the car back out onto the circuit. So Evans just carrying too much speed into the Villeneuve chicane, and it's paid him dividends in the fact that Matt Evans is now down to P3 and Debova up into P2, and now 10 seconds off of Martin. Well, the fact he had to lift due to the yellow flags at Tosa there, but still that 9 seconds, whilst that gap has opened up considerably, it's not the case that he's going to be too far off the pace right now, and I think he can definitely close it down. And to respond to KTEAMS in the Facebook chat, could Sykes' early pit have been tactical, extra fuel to get him to the end possibly? It could be the case that it was tactical. I believe Sykes did jump to the pits though rather than drive into the pits naturally, unless I'm mistaken and my memory's not too good, which if so, I think that was because of the damage on the car. So he probably got the damage repaired, and on top of that, because he was in the pits for so long, I think he would have put the fuel in to go to the end. So I think it's a mix of both. He had to get that car repaired, but also I think he's taken his pit stop as early as he possibly can in order to literally give himself now time out on track, and we would hope that that gap between himself and Debova comes down over the subsequent laps now, particularly within the next 30 minutes. He'll want to get that gap down to approximately, I'd say, about 45 seconds if he can do it, and then after that it's anyone's game where he comes out in the overall play. But as we continue to look around here at the racing as it goes on, we can see that Colin Martin right now really with that positional advantage in the lead, but he is being reeled in, and again this is what's going to be starting to be on Martin's mind right now. He'll know he'll seen Emmons drop down to P3, and he'll recognise the fact that it was a sudden drop off, so it's not as though Debova got the pass done by simply catching up that fast. So that gives Martin a bit of mental reassurance, but of course from his perspective what he's got to think about now is that the driver, as we hear that Evans has had a very brief off, albeit that was at what I believe was around, I'll double check this right now, I think this was at turn 9 into 10, a little bit sideways through turn 9, and the car decided to have a brief off, but he kept it under control, so very nicely controlled there by Emmons. But you can definitely see that the little instant coming out of Villeneuve up into what was Tosa has definitely affected his confidence there, and he's trying to find his way back in, and probably some damage on the car as well, making it a bit of a nastier car to drive as things press on all the same. But for Martin right now, there will be that growing mental pressure inside, I think, where he'll be thinking about the case of, okay, Debova is there, he's 9 seconds back, I'm holding him and I've got to match him for time. But of course, will he be pushing harder, Martin, because of that, or will he be in a comfortable place? His previous lap, 45.1 as he comes to the end of lap number 10, and we see Debova, meanwhile, by comparison, that was a 45.1 as well. So the two drivers are matching each other for time, albeit Debova 300ths faster. So the Dutchman right now doing a very good job of just gradually reeling in the race leader, but it's literally by the smallest of margins, and Emmons definitely having difficulty with the car, as we hear that Navarro in P6, Navarro Debova having a bit of an off at turn 10. A lot of drivers getting caught out by turn 10. The very difficult corner coming out, well, it's out at turn 9, I should really say, coming out of Piratella. But as he's made his way back out into circuit, I think there's no harm done there. But Sykes, meanwhile, now, he is what is the best part of still 1 minute and 11 seconds down on Debova here. So it is the case that the two drivers exchanging lap times. Sykes on that lap was on what was a 47.6, Debova on a 47.3. So again, it's back and forth here, and Sykes really needs to find a little bit more time from somewhere, but of course he has had that pit stop and he could have potentially taken on that fuel, so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. It has opened up a little bit the field right now, and the thing I think in particular that will be on Sykes' mind is he needs to catch up to Addy right now, but Addy's also matching him for lap time. In fact, a bit faster is Addy after a difficult start for the British driver, as we see the P4 man making his way up to Piratella right now. As he goes into the left-hander at 9, just keeping it together. They're a little bit wide. Some of that tyre wear starting to come in, I think, for a good number of drivers, and we could see they're just not able to hold it as tight an apex as perhaps he would like, as we're hearing that Dabova has had a huge off, and also Addy having a brief off. Everybody having offs here now. In fact, Addy having an off going into what was, I believe, that is the corner 4. Turn 12, so that's Aqua Minerale. So everybody just not able to find a safe rhythm here. Even our leader's exposed to it, but let's have a look at what happened to Dabova. So coming down through 1 then, this is coming up into turns 2, 3 and 4, and what exactly happened? So going into 2, you can see the rear end has already let loose. He's just coming with too much momentum, and the rear end said no and decided to throw him around, and that's when we jumped over to see what happened to Addy, where he got it wrong into Aqua Minerale. He just simply understeered off at 12, and now he's back out on circuit in P4, and we can see that further around the circuit, that Emmons, meanwhile, is only the best part of 5.9 seconds up the... Oh, sorry, not 5.9 seconds. He's only the best part of 36.0 seconds up the road. So it is the case right now that our top 3 are in a different world compared to the rest of our drivers, but Emmons falling away a bit from Dabova right now, and really we have a leader pack, albeit it's a spaced out leader pack, and then we've got everybody else around on circuit right now. But with Navarro having that off, what I can definitely tell you is Sykes is now the best part of 52.2 seconds off of Dabova here, so he is gaining, albeit he's got a long way to go, has Sykes, and he has to keep it together all the way through. He's got to nail this and not make a single mistake in order to give himself the best possible chance of gaining any more places. But we'll wait and see, of course, as our drivers continue to push around on circuit right now. But we can see our race leader Colin Martin doing a very good job after 20 minutes of just holding on to that lead. That gap has come down over the last 4 laps from 8.9 seconds to 8.4 seconds, so it is creeping down incrementally. But I think right now Martin just pacing himself and recognising the fact that this race is going to be won on consistency, not an outright pace. Everybody minus Martin and Dabova right now have fallen victim to mistakes here, whether it's the Villeneuve chicane, Tosa or Piratella or Aqua Minerale. They've fallen victim to one of those corners, even some to the opening chicane, and it is going to be the case that they cannot afford to make a mistake. Emmons there on a 45.6 on the lap just completed, meanwhile Dabova on a 44.7 there. But I think there might have been a bit of a track limits cut from Dabova. I'm seeing on my statistics screen. No, that's from a previous lap. We had a very brief, tiny little off. So he hasn't had track limits cut. He's just really putting in the pace. Is Dabova, and well, the gap is continuing to come down as we see Martin now getting himself a little bit of traffic ahead as he makes his way up towards the what is the chicane here. Not the chicane, sorry, Piratella, and as he makes his way up into turn number 9, once again going a little bit wide there, Martin, and this is where the small mistakes start to come. You could see just kept it on circuit, but now that's going to be in his head, figured to himself, right, when I reach turn 9, again, I can't afford to make another mistake, and the driver ahead of him, I should clarify, is Dabova, who's just up in front, and he will have to move out the way very shortly as the blue flags will be waving. But right now, as we speak about the sun, we take a look at the father, and Dabova really pushing hard right now to close that gap down, but at the same time managing the car and just keeping those lines consistent as he presses onwards and down towards Ravazza. As all of our drivers continue to press their way around here, another thought that may be going through some of their heads as well is with regards to the fact that, given particularly if they're based in the United Kingdom state, it's been a very hot day, and whilst they're not racing in the actual cockpits, in the rooms where they're racing with their sim rigs, of course, it is going to be very hot, even if they've got cooling on, and perhaps our drivers are just feeling the heat a little bit. I'm definitely feeling it here in the commentary box, so if I'm feeling it, they've got to be feeling it in the cockpits right now, and that could just disorientate them a little bit, or just simply distract them a tiny bit, as we see the Emmons falling away still further still, as Dabova setting the fastest lap of the race on that lap of 44.35, a phenomenal lap there, albeit Colin Martin on a 44.79, so opening bring the gap down by 4.5 tenths on a single lap there is Dabova, and I think really now we are seeing from the Dutchman in P2 that he is citing the fact he's going to be coming into the pits probably at the halfway point of the race, around the 30-minute mark. Expect a pit stop from the Porsche driver who we're looking at right now, and he's putting in these laps now in order to get that gap down and potentially make the jump through the pit stop. But we'll wait and see, of course, as he makes his way up towards Piratella once again. It's definitely the case. I think the Dutchman now is sighting, putting in his fast laps coming to the end of a stint, and that is going to be critical as he makes his way down to Aqua Minerale. Going a little bit wide of Apex at turn 11 there, but he's got the ability to bring it back together, and this is the advantage he has in the Porsche in particular. Because of the mid-engine rear-wheel drive layout, he can just bring the rear round faster through Aqua Minerale, and any low-speed corner like that where you've got a sweeping Apex into a hard braking Apex, it's the case that you can just get that rear momentum sliding through sooner compared to, say, Colin Martin, where because the mass is towards the front of the car wants to understeer into that braking zone initially and through the opening sweeping Apex, and that's where the difficulty comes in. Now, do keep in mind as well that Martin has had to clear Navarro de Bova in order to continue around on circuit, obviously because of the back marker, so that could be a brief factor as he makes his way along right now, but we can see that the father has passed the son out of the circuit. He's got past his son, and Mark Sykes having a brief off there at turn number 12, just a little bit of an off as he's been pushing very hard, has the British driver, and that gap between himself and Navarro de Bova dropping down to 51.5 seconds right now, but of course he will have lost some time with that brief off, and that will just be getting into his mind right now, the fact that he's had one off after his pit stop, and he can't afford to have too many more of those, because otherwise it's going to take away any chance of a major recovery effort here. As we see that Baker in P5, we haven't seen too much of Baker. We're going to stay with Baker for a little bit right now. The Porsche driver here just having a quiet run in P5. He's 9.6 seconds down on Mark Addy. He could potentially catch that up. In terms of lap time, so on the previous lap, it was the case that, not Mark Addy, Matthew Addy on a 46.3 versus Baker's 47.6. So Addy clearly having a pace advantage, and in fact that on that previous lap was Addy's fastest lap by comparison with Baker's, as he makes his way across that timing line to go on to lap number 15. It is the case that Baker just in a world of his own right now in that P5 position with that 47.171 and looking to bring home a top 5 result. He'll be pleased with that, and it's all good information for him going into the season in 2 weeks time. And of course, while this being a test event, there are no points up for grabs tonight, only bragging rights. And speaking of bragging rights, he won't want to brag about running wide there out of turn 4, as that was just a little bit too much understeering performance through the corner, and that's going to affect his line going into Villeneuve. He won't be carrying as much speed, and he'll have dirt on his tyres, but he's been able to keep it together, Baker, so not being too heavily phased by that. But it's bragging rights up for grabs today, and also a little bit of knowledge, and perhaps particularly if it's a car that a driver really enjoys racing in, such as Martin seems very composed in the BMW M4 GT3 here. It's the case that getting those final little tweaks in with regards to the car, in terms of the little nuances in the mind, and having those there could make the difference between a win or a second place, for example, when we come into the actual season. As we look around right now, and I believe Addy just making his way in towards the Alta chicane here in P4, and just having a peaceful time of the corner so far. Indeed, looking at very, very composed there through the corner as he now makes his way downhill towards turn number 17. But as we look further back here, we can see Sykes by comparison in P7. Well, he's cleared Addy. Addy has been passed by Sykes, so Sykes really pushing onwards, and he has unlapped himself up to P4 right now, and I think that will be the best he can do in terms of unlapping himself. But it does mean, as we see, that Navarro de Bova is only 14.8 seconds up the road with a number of offs on recent laps. Sykes is definitely a man possessed to get P6 back, and we wait eagerly to see whether he's able to do it as he pushes on all the same. But looking back up front, we can see that Jay de Bova has closed that gap down over the last 2 laps from what was 8 seconds to 6.4 seconds. And to give you an idea on that previous lap, Jay de Bova set a 44.63, only 3 tenths off his personal best. Meanwhile, from Martin, it was a 45.73, a second off his personal best. So it's definitely the case that Martin is starting to hit the cliff on this stint. And what we mean by the cliff is that the tyres are starting to go and the car's just not feeling right as a result of that. And it's at that point where you've got to manage those laps, and you can see it again coming out of turn 18, out of Ravazza there. Martin just going wide, understeering into the gravel, 2 wheels off. That'll cost him approximately a tenth to 2 tenths once he comes onto that timing line in the run down towards the Tamburello chicane, as he makes his way down right now into turns the Tamburello chicane, I should say, turns 2, 3 and 4. And as he comes down into the chicane, you'll see that it's going to be one of those instances whereby Martin now really feeling that pressure, and it was a 44.62 for de Bova right now. De Bova is the fastest man on circuit circuit by a considerable margin. Martin is the next closest. Well, I say that Matt Emmons actually is the next closest at 45.2 for the British driver in P3, but both Emmons and De Boven putting in the best possible laps they can right now, whereas Martin seems to be hitting that point where I think he's going to be due for a pit stop by the end of this lap. If it's not the end of this lap, i.e. lap 17, it'll be lap 18, because that car is not looking safe and comfortable for our race leader right now, and you can definitely see he's feeling it through the medium speed corners and the low speed corners. It's just not keeping together as they're continuing to push around, and we see there Emmons going a little bit sideways out of toaster there. The rear tyres just not gripping as much as they'd like to right now as they continue to press on all the same. But looking further around the circuit right now, we can see Baker in P5 still, and he is 12.1 seconds off Addy. That gap between himself and Addy continuing to open up. Addy on the previous lap was a 46.03, whereas Baker was a 46.98. Baker definitely not on the pace of Addy, but again, he's got the consistency at this point, and that will be invaluable to him as he makes his way through turn 4 and now up towards the Villeneuve chicane. De Boven, meanwhile, still being reeled in by Sykes. The gap between the two of them now in the best part of 10.5 seconds. This is the younger De Boven, of course, the son, N De Boven, where we see Sykes chasing after him and continuing to press on as Addy has had another brief off. We're hearing it in our ear, but nothing major coming of it as Martin comes across the line and actually sets a 44.6. And Martin just getting himself settled once again here and finding the lap time out on circuit, and De Boven this time setting a 45.3. So Martin putting in a solid lap versus De Boven, who I think overstepped the mark perhaps a tiny bit over the course of that previous lap. So Martin responding, and in fact Colin Martin saying the fight's not over yet and he's still got some life in the car. So as a result of that, I think it is going to continue to be quite an open race at the moment in terms of the race lead, and we will have to wait and see what's going to happen in the pits, of course. But I think De Boven right now and Martin very closely contested, whereas Emmons by comparison really dropping away still. And in fact, that gap between himself and De Boven now opened up to 13.2 seconds. So not looking good for Emmons as he gets it very wrong coming out of the Villeneuve chicane there and almost hits the exit wall of turn 5. And I think as a result that Emmons now really struggling, and that car does not look as though it's in a good state. I think we could be seeing a pit stop from our P3 driver very shortly. He's got the time out on circuit to afford himself a pit stop. He could even decide to go for just P3 and throw in a safety stop, but we will wait and see what the BMW driver decides to do come the end of this lap. And as we've reached the halfway mark, we'll give a quick summary now of what exactly has happened over the first half of the race. So first half of the race saw a very slow start from our two front drivers, but one driver in particular who decided not to have a slow start and get the jump on everybody was Colin Martin, who you're looking at right now, our race leader, who moved up from P3 to P1 through a daring move around the outside of N De Boven going into the Tamburello chicane. In P2, meanwhile, is Jeremy De Boven, having started right at the back, given the fact that he won the opening race, the sprint race, starting at the back up to P2 by just siphoning his way through the field where everybody else was making mistakes. He was not, and just driving consistently, and has been the fastest man out on circuit for some time, albeit starting to see that pace just fluctuate a little bit, although on the last lap of 44.59, the fastest lap of anybody so far as they went through lap number 18. So still looking very strong is the Porsche driver as he makes his way up towards the Villeneuve chicane right now, and Jay De Boven really in the hunt versus Colin Martin for the race win. 6.4 seconds is the gap between the two of them, both of them due for a pit stop. Matt Emmons, meanwhile, in P3, having started on the front row, had a slow start, and as a result of that, dropped down to what was P3 at the time, only to then get P2 off N De Boven eventually over the course of lap number 1. But then a number of offs and also just some small mistakes here and there have cost Emmons the time he needed to stay in P2, and Jay De Boven has jumped up into that position. Emmons right now with what appears to be a bit of a wounded car due to his offs and gentle hits against the wall, or potential hits near the wall. As a result, just trying to bring this car around to the end of its first stint. You've then got a sizable gap of 51 seconds down to Addy in P4, and now Addy looking relatively strong initially, but as we can see him going on to lap number 19 right now. That Porsche has had a couple of offs recently, and Addy has just experienced offs around the circuit, and as a result of that, we now note that Baker, who started near him in the midfield up into P5 and chasing after him at this point in the race, albeit Baker's lost the place, Addy jumped up 3 places at the start, and now we can see that the battle for P4 is getting closer and closer together. Then down in P6, we've got Navarro De Boven, the son of the De Boven family of racing here today. Of course, our P2 man being the father of the pair. And we can see that Navarro having a difficult race so far as he makes his way out of Aquaminerale, having started on pole given the fact that he finished last in the sprint race, and really it's just not worked out for him. A number of major offs and errors have seen him drop all the way down to P6, but he's still pressing on all the same. And then Mark Sykes, after a disastrous lap number 1, heading into what was a very difficult Villeneuve chicane for everybody, but having a disaster of it up towards Tosa, and as a result of that, jumping back to the pits to repair the car was severely damaged. They got it back out, and he is hunting down Ndebova right now. He's got that gap down from 1 minute and 11 seconds to 9.5 seconds. Can he potentially get that place come the end of the race? Sykes, the only one of our drivers to have pitted so far out of everybody running, and we've had the 2 retirements of Kurt van Hoornacker, who retired as he was coming to the end of his 3rd lap, and Jürgen Nocker not finishing a single lap due to a disastrous opening lap, particularly at the Villeneuve chicane where the car went into the wall at turn number 5. So that is your summary at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, as our drivers continue to push on. And I can tell you that in the time we were covering the order of things, Mark Baker had a major incident, a major off, which has seen him drop from what was 1.2 seconds behind Addy, now down to 10 seconds off. Let's take a look at how it happened. So here we can see it is the Villeneuve chicane, and coming out of 5, just wide of the apex of turn 5, the car understeered off, and then the rear end snapped and the car went straight into the wall there. He had to get it turned around, but also that car has now got significant damage on the front end, and as a result of that, the car's not going to feel very comfortable to drive for the British driver as he continues around the circuit right now. And I think Addy will be breathing a sigh of relief at the fact that the gap between the two of them has opened up considerably. Now, on that lap there, what I can tell you, Colin Martin with a 44.396. Now, 396 is extremely close to what our fastest lap is so far. Our fastest lap is a 44.35 as set by our P2 driver, but news just in, Emmons into the pits after his 19th lap, well, sorry, his 20th lap, so coming to the end of lap number 20 right now. Into the pits is Emmons from P3, and he'll be the first of our leaders, and indeed all of our drivers out on circuit bar Sykes, to go for the scheduled pit stop here as he comes into the pits. Now, the question for Emmons, of course, will be, is this stop to potentially undercut, or is it a case it's just a scheduled stop? I suspect it will be a scheduled stop, but of course Debova and also Martin now will notice that and immediately either react or decide that they do not need to react because they've got enough time out on circuit to be safe. But Jay Debova will be the one under the most pressure out of himself and Martin, because Emmons will be coming after Debova first before he goes after Martin. But the gap between these two, 7.5 seconds, and between Emmons and Debova before Bova came into the pits, it was approximately 10 seconds if our memory serves us correctly. So as a result of that, there is a good gap for Jay Debova to hold on to here, and he can continue to extend this stint if he so desires. Now Emmons is coming out the pits very gradually right now, as we see that Matthew Addy has jumped up into P3, staying out on circuit, but we expect that Addy will drop back down the order come the end of this stint, given the fact that we can see that Emmons just coming out of the pits right now, and Baker has jumped up the order as well. He's jumped up into P4, but again hasn't pitted as of yet. So Emmons coming out of the pit exit right now. We'll see him very shortly, just coming out of the pit lane there on your left hand side of the camera. No major dramatics here, and he's going to have a clear bit of track. Although I say that, I believe that is actually what looks to be Mark Sykes there. No, that's not Mark Sykes, that is Colin Martin coming up behind him here. Martin's going to be lapping what was our P3 man, and that's how long he spent in the pits, has Emmons there. So Martin jumping ahead of our who was our P3 driver on circuit, and Martin just having a phenomenal race so far, as Sykes versus Debova, and Debova I think has had a major incident, and Addy has crashed as well. So let's find out what happened first with regards to Navarro Debova. So coming down to Aquaminerale, the rear of the car has become unstable, and into turn 12, just too much momentum, and you can see the car was never going to stop. But well done to Debova for spinning the car around and getting it stopped before it understeered into the wall there. Let's take a look at what happened to Matthew Addy meanwhile. So Addy here, by the looks of things, coming down towards what is Ravazza here, and going into turn number 17, the rear, no, that's not Ravazza, that's Piratella, and as he went into the corner, the rear just decided to come out on him, losing the grip on those rear tyres. So that's the change there, and Addy still in P3, but Baker now 1.9 seconds off of him once again, as we look back to our race leader right now. Martin having got past Emmons and lapped him effectively, and Jeremy Debova just a bit further back right now, and probably looking on and thinking, right, I need to get closer to Martin. And remember, last time at Catalonia, Colin Martin made a mistake in the pit where he did not fuel the car enough to get to the end as we understand it, and as a result he will not want to make that mistake again as Addy's into the pits from what is P3 and Baker continues out on circuit with 38 minutes of the race completed. So there's still plenty of time remaining in this race as our drivers continue to press on, but we are starting to see those pit stops, and I reckon Emmons will be jumping back past Addy. There he goes. Well, in fact, no, he's jumping back up the order there as Addy comes into the pits. And J-Dub over there coming across the timing line. So I believe it's Emmons, in fact, was in the pits for a very long time. So it may be the case because of the repairs to the car, he's going to be down in P5 as we see J-Dub over here in P2 still and just continuing to press on. At 44.86 for Dubova on that lap. Meanwhile, Colin Martin at 44.57. So it is the case right now that Martin is putting in those stronger laps come the end of this current stint. We suspect there's going to be a pit stop for the pair of them due within the next 5 to 10 minutes because this is phenomenal stintage on their tyres if not. But Addy in the pits right now and Baker making his way down towards what is at this time Aqua Minerale right now. And Addy in fact coming out of the pits very shortly, but now he's come out of the pits. Our timing screens have been updated. That's a little bit of a weird error on our timing screens, but Baker in P3 right now and Emmons as expected up into P4. I was going to say otherwise Addy's jumped a lap on everybody somewhere and that's not going to make any sense whatsoever. But with our timing screens updated, Baker in P3 and Emmons in P4 and hunting down Baker, but of course having made his pit stop now, it's more of a casual case of he just needs to catch up as we see our race leader in the foreground of your camera there, Martin, making his way through the auto chicane and continuing to push to the very end of this current stint. Now, Emmons coming down here, we see that Baker is coming into the pits. We just see outside our commentary box, and as the camera pans round here, we can see that Baker has definitely come in. So as a result, he will be dropping back down the order, and the question will be whether he comes out ahead of or behind Addy. We'll keep an eye on that, but Emmons will re-inherit P3 as a result of Baker jumping into the pits. And indeed, there he goes. He jumps up into P3 once again, regaining his seat on the podium as he makes his way down towards turn number 2, the Tamburello chicane. As he makes his way into 2, of course. Getting it nice and clattered there. In fact, a bit too high on the entry curve there. And as a result, that actually unsettled the car and sent him wide onto the apex of turn number 3. And he was very fortunate then not to see the car jump off the circuit as a result. Emmons really pushing hard right now as he makes his way out of the Villeneuve chicane here. And we are seeing behind him, it is the case that Baker's still in the pits. And Addy, by comparison, just making his way right now down towards Ravazza here. So I think it is going to be the case that it's going to be close between these two drivers as they make their way around the circuit, but particularly Addy, he's really got to push right now. He's got the best part of 2 corners still to go before he can potentially get round there as he makes his way out of Ravazza and goes a little bit wide, a bit too aggressive on the throttle on exit. Will he get himself back up into P4 or will Baker come out ahead of him? Well, Baker's still in his pit stall, so as a result, Addy is going to re-inherit P4, but how much time is the gap between himself and Baker? That will be the big question. As we see that Sykes is now up into P5 as a result of the fact that he had that very early pit stop. So I think Sykes may have actually gone for the early stop, not only to repair the damage off the car, but also to take on fuel, and this could be working out for Sykes, albeit he's still got 18 minutes to go on that set of tyres. If he can do it and if he's got the fuel in the car, this will be phenomenal, because right now, as we see that Baker is starting to come out of the pit lane, it is the case that Sykes is only 6.7 seconds off of the drivers ahead as Navarro Dubova has come out ahead of also Baker, but I don't think Navarro's actually had a pit stop as of yet, as we also see that our race leader is, well, not our race leader, sorry, our P2 man of Dubova is coming into the pits right now, and so that will free up Colin Martin. But of course, Colin Martin right now, the longest of anybody stintage-wise as it currently stands, really going long is Colin Martin here, and I think he's going to try and go practically to the end, as we see behind him that Baker getting out of the way of Emmons there, as Emmons laps Baker and makes his way into the Villeneuve chicane. And a little bit wide, however. Oh, goodness me. And that is Baker into the gravel there and spinning out on the exit of the Villeneuve chicane. But fortunately for him being able to curb the momentum and getting the car just to park itself on the grass rather than going into the wall. As we've seen so many drivers going into the wall on the right-hand side coming out of the Villeneuve chicane there. But keeping it together is Baker, albeit he won't avoid that mistake because that's definitely dropped him further down. And it puts him at risk right now of not being able to hunt down Sykes, who's 7.6 seconds up the road. But then again, Sykes is just having to ease the car around. He's got to nurse the car around the circuit as the British driver, as he comes into the pits. So this is not going to be a magical stintage from Sykes. He's making a second stop, so the first stop was definitely to repair the car. The second stop, however, is to take on the fuel to get himself to the end by the looks of things, unless he feels the tyres just cannot go any further. But meanwhile, up front, Colin Martin just carrying on, just a super trooper right now in terms of the stint. He's gone at 43 minutes on this fuel tank, plus also the tyres. That BMW M4 GT3 must be singing and dancing in his hands. He's looked very capable, and he finally comes into the pits, reacting to Jay Debova then as he makes his way in for his scheduled stop, his one stop of the evening. Meanwhile, Debova, to give you an idea of where he is right now, he's all the way down in Aqua Minerale. He is a long way back, and I do not foresee that Martin is going to be jumped by Jay Debova unless there is some sort of miracle here, in all honesty. But say it ain't so, it can happen, of course, as Sykes is still in the pits, and he's dropping down the order right now to P7 as it currently stands, as Baker has got past him, and we'll see where Sykes comes back out. But Sykes coming back out in last of our runners right now, and it'll be the case in the remaining 16 minutes. What can he do? As we see Colin Martin coming out the pits very quickly here, so this was a very short stop from the BMW driver. Now, is there a mistake here? Has he done something wrong this time, much like at Catalonia, or has he nailed this one and not made a mistake? That'll be the question, of course. That'll be on a lot of people's minds, definitely on my mind, as we hear that Sykes is leaving the pit lane as well right now, but he's going to be a long way down on the drivers he's potentially chasing. But Martin, well, it was a short stop, relatively short stop, and he's gained a lot of time over Debova because of it. The gap between the two of them when Jay Debova pitted was approximately in the region of 6 seconds. It's now opened up to 14.2 seconds as a result. It could be the case that Colin Martin's doing a lot of fuel saving in that car and just playing with the gap and playing with the pace, or just feels he's in the zone right now and nothing's going to stop him. With 15 minutes to go, it's definitely the case. I don't think anybody out on circuit's going to stop him, so long as he doesn't trigger a stop himself. That'll be the big question. But right now, it is really a case of who is going to be able to challenge Colin Martin. I think the only person who can challenge him right now is himself. But we will wait and see all the same, as Addy in P4 continues to press on, being the best of the rest effectively. 1 minute and 3 seconds down on Emmons, and in a very quiet place. But he's got a nice 38.2 second gap over Debova right now. And Debova hasn't got past Baker, it should be pointed out. Albeit I don't have confirmation of when that pass actually happened, but it's the case that he's up into P5. But do keep in mind, I know where that pit's happened. It's happened because of the fact that Debova right now, as I understand it, has not had a pit stop as yet, so he's still got to do his mandatory pit stop, has the Dutchman, so he will drop down the order in due course, but he will press on for the time being, as we see him just get a little bit high on the exit curve there of Villeneuve, as you see Emmons in the rear of the picture getting ever closer and getting ready to lap him. As we look back up to our race leader, Colin Martin just pressing on all the same and continuing to open that gap up versus his main rival Jay Debova here, and well, just pushing down at this point. And I think here as well, Martin will not be looking to set any majorly fast laps here. Just keep it together, keep it sensible, and bring that car home. He'll be very pleased with the result if he's able to do that. And to give you an idea of the relative delta between the two drivers, well, on that previous lap, Jeremy Debova with a 1:48.9. Meanwhile, Colin Martin, of course, with the pit exit on that one with a 2:09.97. That definitely goes to highlight the fact that really Colin Martin had a very short pit lap by comparison with everybody else, and that is how he's opened up that gap even more. He's got full control of this race. As we see Emmons right now in P3 just not able to do anything, as Mark Sykes has had an off, and that is at the Villeneuve chicane. So many drivers falling victim to that, as we're also hearing that our number 4 driver of Addy has had a simple, in fact Addy has had a wall hit I think there. Let's take a look at what happened. So just two wheels on the, or one wheel on the grass, so the rear right hand wheel just saying it did not want to cooperate as he went a little bit wide on exit into the Villeneuve chicane, and the car just skidding. Literally a passenger in his own vehicle, but fortunately able to return to the circuit relatively unscathed, minus a little bruise on the rear bumper. That is a very, very fortunate for Addy there, but a lot of our drivers just being caught out with the narrowest of the circuit going into the braking zones here, and that will be on their minds as we see now Emmons having to clear the traffic of Debova here as they make their way through Villeneuve. He'll be catching up to the Dutchman. I reckon he'll probably do it in the run up towards Piratella, and you can see in fact it's going to be at Tosa, where simply Debova just moves out of the way by staying on the wide line there and not trying to compete for it or trying to take the an actual racing line. Good sportsmanship there from Endabova, and obeying those blue flags, of course, making it nice and easy for the P3 driver to get through as they make their way through Piratella once again. And you can see here that Emma's just having so much grip by comparison to Bova right now, but Bova not too far back, but I'm definitely feeling the pinch of that tyre life right now as they both make their way uphill. And Endabova getting it very, very close to a nightmare there, going into turn number 12, the midpoint of Aqua Minerale, but keeping it together, a little bit of rallycross there, but definitely those tyres will feel horrific come the end of this stint, because there's just so much wear on them as it currently stands. But meanwhile, Colin Martin making his way around still. He's on what is his 28th lap, and just having a very, very strong performance here. And I don't think anything can stop him. Jadabo starting to close up a little bit. To give you an idea on that previous lap, Martin a 45.3, Jadabova a 44.7. But it is the case that the P2 man has got a long way to go, as his son, Endabova, meanwhile, comes into the pits on what was P5. And this will promote Baker back up into P5. And we believe will drop Endabova down to P6. But will Sykes potentially be able to get ahead of Endabova, or get himself close enough, having had to make that second pit stop? We will wait and see. We will wait with bated breath, of course, but Sykes right now all the way down at Aqua Minerale right now. He'll be pushing, of course. He'll be doing everything he can, albeit he won't want to go that deep all the time in through Aqua Minerale's turn 12 there, because you could see just how he had to catch the car before it understeered too wide. But really pushing on right now is the Porsche driver here, the British driver, having had the disastrous start to the race, doing everything he can. But Endabova coming out the pits already as Sykes goes wide out the auto chicane. You can see on the camera there on the left hand side, just making his way out the pit lane here. So Sykes is going to be nowhere near close enough to capitalise here, and I think it is the case that Endabova has re-secured his P6 and will feel safe minus any late incidents with 10 minutes to go. But as our drivers continue to make their way then with 10 minutes remaining here, it is going to be the case that Colin Martin right now just making his way through and keeping it together. And the lap exchange last time around, Colin Martin a 45.5, Jay Dabova meanwhile a 44.96. So it definitely is the case that Dabova is going faster. And I'll tell you one driver who is going even faster than the two of them. It is Matt Emmons, meanwhile, our P3 driver, the other BMW M4 GT3 driver, making his way right now down through Rivatsa, turn 17, and then coming up to turn 18. His previous lap was a 44.79, so the fastest out of our top three. But when he's the 48 seconds down on Jay Dabova, I think this is more just to say he had the pace to take the fight to further up the podium today, but it's not going to be the case that he's going to benefit at all as he comes across the start finish line to complete that lap. And that lap there was a 44.52, almost the fastest lap we've seen all evening. The fastest lap, of course, going to Colin Martin with that 44.32, but it's been back and forth. And really, our top three, their fastest laps have been within a tenth of one another. It has been a very close call between them, but of course it's been the instance and the mistakes that have made the difference between Martin being up front and Jay Dabova being a bit further down and Emmons being even further down, and also the fact that Martin had an incredibly short pit stop. But I'm hearing once again Colin Martin into the pit, so it's literally Catalonia repeated. Martin with another pit stop here. This is not good news for Martin, because that means, oh, he definitely seems to have underfueled the car. It means that as he makes his way out of turn 19 right now to go on to lap 30, Jay Dabova is going to inherit the lead, and it means the Dutchman now has only got to bring the car home. So whether Colin Martin forgot to put fuel in the car or whether something just went wrong, it is the case he's leaving the pits right now. And, well, it's going to be a chase to the end here. And Colin Martin, well, he's coming out of the pit lane as we speak. But this is completely unexpected. And it is literally a repeat of Catalonia, where Martin literally has the win in his grasp, only to see it disappear with only minutes to go. As it is the case now, Jeremy Dabova has to bring the car home. He's got 8 minutes to go, and that will approximately equate to about another 5 laps. Can the Dutchman do it? Can he make it 2 wins out of 2 tonight? He's got a nice 20-second gap between himself and the Brit behind, but Martin's going to be kicking himself for this one, because this was not to be expected, and that means now he's got to try and hunt this down. But unless he's planning to strip 4 to 5 seconds a lap out of Dabova, I do not think it's going to happen, unless by some divine miracle Jay Dabova has an instant of a lifetime here. But it is the case right now that with all that, Matthew Addy in P4, very comfortable in that P4, 45.5 seconds up the road from Baker. I think really that is going to determine our order unless there are any sudden instance from anyone, because it is so clear. So we're going to take a very brief breather and have a cup of water, and then we'll get back to you to wrap this one up. But right now, as we see Addy making his way through the auto chicane, all our drivers continuing to just try and bring their cars home right now. It is the case that I don't think there's going to be any fights out on circuit. But Jeremy DeBoer definitely, I think, will be jubilant at the fact, and you can see that he's not backing the car off. That was a 44.638 on that previous lap, so still keeping the high octane pace in there. I think DeBoer just reckons the fact that if he switches off at all, it may be the case that he makes a mistake and costs himself the race. And that's one of the things as well which a number of our drivers, where they've been running solo but holding on to perhaps the best position they can get in the race, have had to deal with mentally over the course of the race, is having no pressure on them in order to perform. Are you not having the guy behind you, the position behind you, close behind? It means that you're not under that pressure to worry about them as much. In fact, you can start to feel a little bit distracted. You might be starting to think about what's going to be on the agenda for the races in 2 weeks' time, for example. But you can definitely see with Jay DeBoer in particular, his mind's always there and putting in lap after lap relentlessly, and the consistency tonight from Jay DeBoer. I mean, Colin Martin's been doing very similar consistency, levels of consistency, but it's really been the Jay DeBoer show, and he's done a phenomenal job as a result of it. And I think really just keeping his head in the game has enabled him to push on and not make any mistakes here, as we hear from Kurt Van Hernacker in the YouTube chat, who had to retire early on, of course. It is the case. Kurt cheering on Jeremy DeBoer here, and we can definitely understand he's rooting for his fellow countrymen, as he's only now got 5 minutes to go before it's over. I think it's definitely the case, Ironic, who's speaking to us on the Twitch chat, that Martin might need to overfuel the car. We'll find out from Martin, of course, post-race. We won't have the opportunity to interview him tonight, but we'll definitely find out what happened there. But I do think it was the case that the car had been underfueled, because that was a shocker to the senses. But with 5 minutes to go, everybody will now be hoping that 5 minutes can go as quickly as possible. None more so than I reckon Addy, who has had an up and down race, but it's ending on a high right now as it currently stands. I think he'll be very pleased with this P4, given the fact that it was looking a nightmare earlier on. But Baker, Endevover, and also Sykes all having bigger offs and bigger instants compared to Addy, albeit you can see that rear wing on the Porsche looking a little bit crumpled there, and that's where he hit the rear of the car into the wall coming out of Villeneuve earlier on in the race, as he makes his way through the Villeneuve, well, not Villeneuve chicane, the Tamburello chicane, and now coming up towards Villeneuve, I should say, as he comes out of 4 and towards 5 here. And it really is the case of just everybody trying to bring the car home right now, as we see Endevover here making his way through Piratella, and he has got the leader coming up behind him. Well, in fact, that is the leader of Jay DeBoer here, as they make their way into Aqua Minerale. And we can see the fastest that has just been set by Matt Evans. It is a 1:44.29, the fastest that we have seen in race trim all evening here, and Emmons taking home the consolation prize of the fastest lap. Again, not worth anything today, but still it'll be worth something in terms of a bragging right here, as he goes a little bit wide out of the Villeneuve chicane there, but keeps it together going up to Tosa here. And it's a good run from Emmons, despite the difficulties, despite the offs. If he can get this home in P3, which I'm sure he will, he'll still be pleased with. He's on the podium, and it's all good information and knowledge going into the main season in 2 weeks' time. As we look further down, Addy having had that race and now in P4 as he goes a little bit sideways coming out the auto chicane there. Definitely think that the tiredness is starting to kick in for Addy, and behind him will Baker, the best part of 46.5 seconds down. Both drivers I think can start to cool it off a little bit as they make their way around the course for the last couple of times. Endevover having had to let Jay DeBoer through, obviously let his dad through right now, but the son will be looking on, I think, proud of his father, and I think his dad will be looking back proud of his son to see him continuing to make his way around on the circuit, as we see Sykes setting a personal best there of a 45.347 towards the end, but not close enough to catch up to the son of the Dabova family, who is 13 seconds ahead, and he is closing him quite rapidly, of course, but I don't think he's going to overhaul him enough in order to get this done by the end of the race. I think Sykes will have to settle for P7, but it's still been a very strong effort from the British driver, and I don't think anything more could be asked of him. But as we look back up to our race leader right now, we can see that Jay Dabova just making his way down towards Aquaminerale, coming through the sequence of corners once again, and really it has been the story that he has led this one from start to finish and no complaints. Well, I say he's led this one from start to finish, he's led this one in his mind from start to finish, I would say, until Colin Martin obviously started to break away. I think he felt confident that Jay Dabova that he could catch up to Martin, but then Martin really had the pace to hold him off, and it was only because Martin seemed to make the similar mistake from Catalonia where he just didn't seem to put fuel in the car, or he just needed to take a second stop, and that's what's given Dabova the ability to come up and take the race win. I think in his mind he always thought he was going to catch Martin, and I think he was hoping that he'd have the opportunity to do it out on the circuit, but it's not going to be that case as he makes his way onto what we believe will be his final lap. Meanwhile, Martin, he was the one who was going to lead it from start to finish, I think, in his mind, but unfortunately having to take that second stop due to an error in the pits by the sounds of things, and really he didn't put a single foot wrong, rather it was just the pit strategy hasn't worked out, and as a result of that, having to come home in another P2 come the end of the final lap here. And then it'll be Evans in P3, who, having had a number of offs in the midpoint of the race here, wasn't able to take the fight to Martin and fell behind Dabova due to the offs. I think just feeling the pressure and not comfortable with Imola as a circuit. He was saying that going into tonight, but still I think he'll be happy with himself with that P3. And Addy really the best of the rest. In P4, it's been a difficult race for everybody from P4 downwards. Mistakes left, right and centre. But Addy with the less punishing mistakes and being able to hold it together as best as possibly can. And Baker, I think, will be kicking himself. He was going to be in the fight with Addy, but then a couple of major errors put him too far away. And that's why the gap is 46 seconds between the pair of them. As Navarro Dabova just following his dad around for the remaining lap, and will be looking to do everything he can to improve going into Season 2. And the same with Mark, that disastrous start, but still bringing the car home in a P7, doing everything he could to push. But the one man who has not made a single mistake, he's been consistent throughout the evening, winning race number 1 by a good margin, and in the end keeping it together, leading the Dutchman home on the podium, a Dutch dominated podium. It won't be a podium featuring all 3 places with Dutchman this time, but at the top of it, it will be a Dutchman as he makes his way then out through Ravazza through turns 11 and 18. Only one little kink to go as he comes towards the finish line. He's going to bring it home and make it 2 from 2. It will be Jay Dabova who wins race number 2 of the Imola test event in the pre-season for Season 2, and alongside him his son crosses the line in formation side by side. Family pride there definitely on display, but Jay Dabova wins by 13.1 seconds ahead of Colin Martin, who again with that pit error having lost the win will come home in a P2, and I think will be happy, but at the same time kicking himself for what seems to be similar to Catalonia. And it will be Matt Evans after an off we're hearing at Piratella, alternatively Aquaminerale, at one of the 2 corners there. He'll be coming out of the final corners very shortly to come home in P3. It's been a very difficult race for the British driver. A P3 all the same, but he would have wanted more and felt he could have gone for more, but still a valiant effort, bringing it home on the bottom step of the podium. He crosses the line, 29.5 seconds down on Colin Martin. P4 has gone to Matthew Addy. He's already crossed the finish line, being a lap down on our race leaders, and he'll be pleased with that P4 after the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations. And Baker, as he's making his way around the circuit right now, coming out of the final quarter to complete his race, come home in P5. I bet he'll reckon in his heart he could have had the P4 today if it weren't for some of those major errors, but still plenty to take forward. And Dabova, meanwhile, again, P6, but plenty of information to go in. A lot of mistakes tonight in race number 2, but he'll be taking that information forward and sure to improve. And Sykes, well, What else can you say about Mark Sykes other than dogged determination to finish the race? Definitely with those 2 stops, it was never going to be the case that he could get himself all the way out the order no matter how hard he tried. But still, a good effort from Sykes to bring the car home in P7, only 9.1 seconds off of Endabova. And remember, when he came out the pits to repair the car, he was 1 minute and 11 seconds down on Endabova. So to close the gap up by a minute, or just over a minute over the course of an hour's race distance is phenomenal work. But all of our drivers now making their way into the pits, as will be led in by Jadabova on this parade lap effectively as they cool the cars down. A brilliant effort from everyone. Jadabova coming into the pits then along with his son behind him, and Colin Martin of course will be thinking to himself, I'll have you next time, as Emmons just making his way around. Addy coming into the pits right now, and Sykes also at the head of that chain there in the camera. But Baker just making his way through Piratella right now. And Emmons, again, plenty to take forward. And whilst it hasn't been a track that's really favoured the British driver, I think he'll be pleased with the fact he was able to get the car home. And he wasn't to bin the car in the end. He was able to keep it together as he comes into the pit lane. So looking promising going into the season for Emmons. And indeed it is for Colin Martin and Jadabova. And then Baker, as he makes his way through the auto chicane right now, just cooling it down on this final lap. It's going to be one of those situations, I think, for Jadabova where he will be thinking to, well, not for Jadabova, sorry, for Baker, where he'll be thinking to himself right now, I've got to iron out those major mistakes when I go into the main season. If I can do that, then I can get some very solid results to the board, because keep in mind, Baker wasn't far off for competing for the higher positions all the way through, but it's just those mistakes which held him back in the end. As he's the final driver to complete this final parade lap, then he comes into the pits, and that will conclude our second race this evening and brings to a close all of our races for tonight at Imola. So thank you very much for tuning in to our races tonight as part of the Imola test event in the pre-season for Season 2 of the Next Gen Racing iRacing GT3 and GTE Championship, which will be kicking off on the 30th of June. Be sure to come back in 2 weeks' time as we get the season underway, but I think this is the final test event unless we have another one planned next week. We'll be sure to let you know about that in due course, but thank you very much for tuning in. If you have enjoyed this, be sure to let us know either on the Next Gen Racing Facebook page, alternatively on our YouTube page, or let me know on Twitch at TX141. I've been Paul TX141 Walsh, but until next time, of course, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, stay on track. Good night.